His ordinary life ends beneath the wheels of a truck. When he opens his eyes again, he's reborn as a noble boy in a world where magic reigns supreme, only to discover that the god of fire cursed his new body to never wield magic. Blessed by the god of war instead, he enrolls in the kingdom's greatest academy to master the path everyone else abandoned. Given a second chance at life, he'll protect the family he couldn't protect before, and prove that martial arts can stand above magic itself. People say that before death, a person's entire life flashes before their eyes. Shuichi's father called him and told him to look after his mother and sister. His mother handed him a container wrapped in a towel and said she'd made his favorite omelet. His mother had taken a new part-time job, so he shouldn't worry about money and just focus on studying. His sister, Azusa, was eating candy and said it was delicious and he should try it. He asked her to listen to her mother and then left for school. At school, his containers were smashed to pieces, and a nasty guy approached him and asked how dare he show up at school. Several people started kicking him, shouting at him what a weakling he is, trying to act like a hero to a woman. A girl standing nearby told him he shouldn't have angered them and to just take care of himself. Sometime later, Shuichi was walking down the street and didn't notice a huge truck bearing down on him. A moment later, he was struck by a car and he died right there on the road, lying in his own blood. He was surprised that he would die this way and thought about his sister and mother. He apologized for not being able to protect them and cried just before his death. If a second life exists, he vowed to protect those dear to him with his own hands. People crowded around him, unsure how to help him. After some time, he found himself on the magical continent of Arcanas. The event host shouted, "Believers, today they are holding an annual divine blessing. Children under 6 will offer the gods their most prized possession, and if their offer is accepted, the gods will send a divine messenger. This spirit will sense the child's hidden magical power and grant them the chance to become a mage. Any child wishing to receive a divine blessing must sign here." One boy asked his mother if he offered his favorite candy, would he also learn magic? Mom replied that she didn't think so. It must be some kind of precious stone, like those worn by nobles. One of the girls presented a box of precious earrings, and her friends, upon noticing them, were surprised. "Ladylike stones look so expensive," she replied. "Of course, the more valuable the offering, the greater the chance of a blessing." People discussed the fact that, by the way, they had heard that the Ryan family had spent their entire fortune on this blessing. At that moment, a full-fledged family entered the room, and people discussed how if they had come this far and still didn't receive a blessing, it would be a disaster. Holt Ryan, the head of the family, reflected on the enormous stake he was making for the family's future. Lucas Ryan is the 6th child of the Ryan family, and Julia Ryan is the 7th. These two, the smartest in the family, would definitely receive a high-class blessing. At that moment, the host called the next ones, and Julia came forward. She approached, grabbed the crown in her hands, and as she put it on, magical chains formed around her. When the entire room was illuminated by a bright light, people realized it was the Thunder God's blessing. This also constituted a 7th level. They hadn't seen such a level in 12 years. The girl had such talent. The Ryan family was finally blessed. A moment later, the girl stopped and looked ahead questioningly. Her parents were stunned and delighted by what was happening. Incidentally, she had received a crown from the Thunder God, but that wasn't worth the entire Ryan family fortune. There was also a second child, and the secret treasure was clearly for that child. Lucas came out to them, and before he went out, his father adjusted his clothes and said it was his turn. Let him go with the god. When Lucas grabbed the jewels from the box, the guys realized the magical power emanating from this sword was astonishing. Vulcanus, the god of fire, the progenitor of magic, this was astonishing. Julia wished him luck, and when Lucas took the stage, the host was surprised that offering something so valuable was so powerful. The head of the Ryan family had bet everything on this child. When Lucas approached the counter, the entire sky was bathed in a bright, fiery light and then darkened. People were amazed that the sky had changed color, as this had never happened before. His father suggested that perhaps this was the highest level, the 9th. At that moment, all the torches burst into flames, as did the room. Lucas stood stunned, unsure of what was happening. He looked in surprise at the fiery sword in his hands, then saw the flames spreading throughout his entire body. This greatly frightened him, and he began to scream loudly. Then everything stopped for a moment, and the fiery flashes began to fade. The sky returned to normal, and the blessing ended. But no one understood where the divine messenger was. His parents were deeply worried about their son, as was Julia, who became sad. At that moment, Lucas collapsed to the floor and looked at his parents with tears in his eyes. Julia dropped her candy and began to sob and scream. "Brother Lucas." His parents ran to him and begged him to please wake up, but they couldn't understand why. The announcer announced that the god had rejected his offerings. Lucas Ryan had been rejected by the progenitors of magic. His parents were saddened and held the child in their arms. Meanwhile, in the god of fire's domain, he cursed, unable to understand how Ryan's family dared to offer him the sword that had nearly killed him. The blade still bore unforgivable marks from where it had cut him. They should be grateful that he had merely burned the child's soul. It was merciful. His subordinate said he had a generous heart, and it seemed a soul from another world had entered the child's body. Should he burn it again? He replied, "No need. A parasite from the outside world would not withstand the effort." And now he offered to look at this offering. The assistant replied that it was quite a good thing, and they watched Lucas's movements through a magic ball. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. The god of war's domain, a heavenly cave, awoke and opened his bright eyes, piercing everything around him with rays. He caught his breath and abruptly began running along his glass barrier, which he immediately destroyed. The source of power that governs this world, and what was stopping him from ascending to a higher dimension. The monster bared its teeth and looked at him, then abruptly opened its mouth. After this creature released dark magic, it smiled despite him, and the god of war, enraged, saw his outline reflected in the monster's eyes and slipped past. Their battle continued for some time, and when the god of war stopped, he smirked. He looked into the distance and saw a bright flash approaching. Suddenly, his entire body shook, and he realized that the source of power wasn't so strong after all. The god of war's assistant grabbed his arm and screamed, "Why is this bothering him?" He replied that this feeling meant his former partner had been destroyed. What's going on the Arcana's continent? 1,000 years ago, martial arts were more powerful than magic. But now people worship the god of fire? This weakling he almost killed with one blow? The assistant said that if he weren't so obsessed with martial arts, he wouldn't have allowed this petty god to flee in such a frenzy. And yet, he's still allowed to spread martial arts himself. At this point, the god of war became angry and said he had no interest in developing martial arts, but he still had a responsibility to pass them on to future generations. A being like him must always strive forward. After some time, the protagonist opened his eyes and was surprised. Was he dead? He heard a voice. At that moment, he saw a crowd crowding over him and became frightened. His face turned blue and the god of war introduced himself, saying his name was Mars, and that he would grant him the blessing of the god of war. At that moment, he suddenly jumped up and tried to catch his breath. The god continued to shout that his name was Mars, the god of war, and that he was granting him the blessing of the god of war. The protagonist had no idea what had happened, and at that moment the god of war struck him with a beam of light right in the head, causing him to collapse. The blessing of the god of war in level 9 is a level restriction for martial arts training that had been lifted. He was dumbfounded and tried to get out of bed, clutching his head. He asked, "What was that? War god level 9? And speaking of spirits, why are they so cool? So what's going on here? He should be dead. He was hit by a truck. Why is he still alive?" Shuichi didn't understand what was happening when suddenly memories of Lucas's past appeared in his head, and he realized that he was now him. He laughed and trembled, asking, were the gods laughing at him? Was he reincarnated in a world of magic as a child who was rejected by the gods? At this rate, his family would be different from him, and this life was turning out much worse than the past. Mom, Azusa, they probably will, but wait, now they can live on his insurance. But still, the blessing of the god of war, he doesn't even know what martial arts are. He looked at his hands when suddenly he saw a candy fall near his bed. Julia ran into his room and screamed with tears in her eyes, "Brother, he's awake." She hugged him with incredible strength and cried loudly, saying that she heard Jerami and the others saying that he wouldn't wake up. She was so worried. Shuichi stroked her head and told her that everything was fine, that she shouldn't cry. He realized that this girl was probably Lucas's sister, Julia. They were probably saddened by his death. He lost everything when he was reborn. No, this time he would protect those dear to him and would defend them with the last of his strength. He was counting on him, the warrior. Shuichi looked out the window and saw a bright beam of light. Sometime later, in the altar, where there were many statues, blood began pouring from the eyes of one of them. The blood spread throughout the room, and the monster said that the presence of this bastard had disappeared. The monster placed his hand in the bloody bowl and asked if he simply died or left this world. She had so little strength left. At that moment, the girl looked up and said that it didn't matter, since he no longer stood in their way, and this world would soon belong to them. 9 years later, the Ryan family estate. Lucas walked around the courtyard and wiped sweat from his face, saying that the weather had improved greatly. Julia must have finished her magic training, so he wants to go and meet her. At that moment, he heard a rustling in the bushes behind him and abruptly turned back in fright, when suddenly the ivy grabbed his body and dragged him along. He was surprised. Was this happening again? Only one person would do such nonsense. It was Jeremiah. Jeremiah grinned and said that they met again. Lucas, the child rejected by the gods. This was his brother, the fourth child of the Ryan family, a fifth-level blessed mage student, Lucas's half-brother. His maid asked, "Oh my god, haven't they kicked him out yet?" Jeremy said that he had already told him that only family mages were allowed in the backyard. He pinned him even tighter in the ivy and asked if he could take this lesson away if he broke a couple of his ribs. Right, Lucas began to scream loudly in pain and said that his sister would soon finish her magic training and she could arrive at any second. If he doesn't want to be fried to a crisp by lightning, then let him go. Jeremy screamed that he was a coward and that he shouldn't tell him what to do. He was just hiding behind his sister, as if he were afraid of a small bolt. Just then, lightning struck him with such a flash that Jeremiah screamed and fell to the ground. His maid, furious for her master, went to his aid. When he saw Julia approaching, she waved her staff and said that if he offended her brother again, he would get what he deserved. Julia grew up and looked at Jeremiah angrily. Then she turned to Lucas and said that she would immediately remove those branches from him. A moment later, she released him, and Lucas hugged his sister. He smiled and asked Jeremy if he thought he had learned his lesson and wouldn't do it again. Jeremy shook in pain and didn't answer. The maid tried to take him away while he was still trying to curse. Lucas said he was a great runner and that she had truly spared him. Julia said that if he had tried, she would have definitely beaten everything out of him. Why didn't he answer him? Lucas replied that his true strength was a secret only between them. Besides, she would protect him. Wouldn't Julia? She answered, of course, and the protagonist smiled. It had been 9 years since he was reborn in Lucas's body. 9 years ago, when he woke up, Lucas's father came to him, and he was sure he would be kicked out of the house for not living up to his expectations. But he dropped his crutch and said that he was so glad he woke up safely. That's all that mattered. He hugged him with tears in his eyes and held him close. Holt Ryan is the leader of a knightly order, so he's almost never home. But even so, he's a good father who truly cares about them. When Holt learned he'd started training martial arts, he immediately sent him a letter with useful information. Their family archives contained several old books on martial arts, and he hoped they'd be useful in his training. Thanks to these letters, he was able to put a bold plan into action. One day, someone shouted his name, and the maids were confused. "Oh my God, where did he go? He's so young and always running away." Another maid told them not to worry about him, because he can't even use magic, and they'll kick him out soon, she'll see. Suddenly, their faces twisted, and one of them asked, "By the way, hasn't the ground been shaking a lot lately? Does someone seem to be practicing earthbending?" Meanwhile, Lucas was fighting and training in the cave. He thought that was enough. The action took place not far from the archives. He spent 6 months digging under his room to build a secret training ground and divided the space into 4 zones. There was a classroom, training rooms, a storage room, and a bathroom. He'd spent all his money on furnishing the other areas, so he figured a cheap bath would do. Ever since he completed the training grounds, he'd been training there every day. It was currently very cozy and comfortable. He struck a special barrel with a shockwave and moved in. Taking a therapeutic bath is the most effective way to relieve tension after martial arts training. Until he started training with a book he found in the archives, called the Chaotic Tempering Technique. Now, any level 5 magical attack wouldn't even leave a scratch on him. His defense was finally improving, and as for offense, he turned sharply and brandished his sword, beginning to fight. Suddenly, he turned around and slashed the other way, cutting the dummy into pieces. When he destroyed it, he clenched his fist. This was Cloud-Piercing Thunder Spear, level 4 achieved. Lucas decided to practice his first techniques a little more. His skills had steadily improved over the past 9 years. But one thing troubled him. According to the books, when a martial artist reaches a certain level, they reach the limit of their capabilities, and the only way to break through is to achieve enlightenment. But enlightenment is so difficult to achieve that most practitioners simply give up in despair. That's why almost no one trains martial arts, even though they're as powerful as magic. However, he was a different man. He made a fist and continued training, when suddenly, his eyes widened and he struck the special object he'd destroyed. When he did, he exhaled with relief. His exploding fist of furious war had reached level 5. His levels were constantly increasing, and there was no talk of any limit yet. Perhaps it was because they shared a divine blessing. When the clock struck 6, he realized that Holt was coming home that day, and they would have a family dinner. He returned to his room, got ready, and went to the living room where his family was waiting. He informed them that it had been 6 months since their last meeting, and that he had been waiting for him, so he should please sit down with them. Lucas smiled and replied, "Yes, Alan's Magic Academy is opening a special martial arts department," and he had already enrolled him there. Jeremy was angry about this, and Holt said that martial arts are difficult, but he knew he could handle it. The entrance exam is next week, so he needs to prepare for it. Lucas smiled and thanked his father, then realized that no matter what world he was in, he had to become stronger to protect what was important. But he shouldn't stand out too much, because that would only get him into trouble. Suddenly, Julia raised her hand and said that she also wanted to attend Allen Academy. He replied that this was a good goal, but she was only 11 years old and too young to enroll there. Julia replied that they had a summer class and there was no age limit. In fact, she had already received an invitation from the elite academy and handed him a letter. Her father grinned and understood. Apparently, her reputation as a genius had even reached Allen Academy. Her mother chuckled and said that perhaps in the near future they would see the birth of a great one from the Ryan family. The boys exchanged glances while Jeremy watched this with anger, and his father said he would pray for them both to pass their exams with flying colors. Jeremy, behind the track, angrily responded that Julia was fine, but why was Lucas getting special treatment? If he entered the Magic Academy, what would happen to his reputation? At that moment, his mother approached him, pinched his arm, and told him to calm down. He was scared, and she said not to worry. Her name was Jessica, the second wife of the Ryan family, Jeremy's mother. Still, there was no guarantee he'd pass, right? The thought made her smile. A week later, the day of the martial arts exam at the Magic Academy, Mom wished Lucas and Julia good luck and said that once they settled in, she'd come with their favorite pudding. She gave them gold coins and told them not to forget the lucky coins their father had given them. Holt once told the children that these coins belonged to the Boone dynasty, who united the world about 10,000 years ago, and he obtained them by taming a magical beast. Mars, the first emperor, won the advance in front and his weapon in the back. Lucas was surprised and asked, "Mars? That face, that's that cool spirit." His father told him to always keep it to himself. The claws are a good luck charm. When Lucas looked at his new family, he remembered his family from his past life. They were so similar. He was blessed with a good family in both lives, and he was truly lucky. Now they were leaving. A few hours later, they were riding in a carriage through the forest. The sun would soon set, so the coachman suggested setting up camp. Night fell, and he said that if they left tomorrow morning, they would reach the city of Daku, where the Allen Academy is located by nightfall. Julia said, "It will be so fast." "Mr. Forden, what is interesting in the city of Daku?" He replied, "Of course." And when they think of Daku, they immediately think of the annual magical dodgeball tournament held in the spring, which is also famous for its cuisine. Julia was delighted by it all and smiled. Lucas said she was even drooling, and at that moment he felt something wrong behind him. 2 kilometers away, 12 horses and 13 people were rapidly approaching them. He turned to Forden and said that it seemed there were bandits in the area. He replied yes, but the chance of running into them was quite low. Lucas realized that his chaotic tempering technique gave him not only strong defense and offense, but also excellent instincts. He hadn't misheard. There were only 5 of them, and one of them was a child, so they needed to be more careful. He stood up and said that an unknown group was heading this way, and that they should quickly form up. Everyone was dumbfounded by what they heard, not understanding what was happening. One of the knights remarked that he couldn't even hear the chirping of birds. What was young Master Lucas talking about? Orden grabbed his sword and said, "Didn't they hear him? They should prepare their weapons now." They answered yes, and Fordon was surprised. He didn't know where he got this information, but he better be on the safe side. A moment later, the bandits actually approached them, and the knights shouted, "They're really here!" The bandit roared with laughter and shouted for them to look. "These are new victims." The boss was right. There would be plenty of options here before the Allen Academy exam. He could sell this babe for a high price. And what about the boy next to her? He thought he'd be in demand with such clients. Forden asked, "Do they even understand what happens to those who mess with nobles?" The bandit shouted, "Who cares about nobles? Let them kill everyone except those 2 brats." It was the bandit leader, who was confident in himself. The knight shouted to Lord Forden that he would cover him, and the bandit decided to pounce first. But the knight struck him with his sharp weapon, stunning the bandits. At that moment, Forden destroyed him and cut off his head. He turned to Lady Julia and told her to leave it to him. He screamed loudly and continued to destroy the remaining bandits, then told Lord Lucas to take Lady Julia and run away. At that moment, Lucas heard someone scream loudly, and all the people burned alive in a fiery flame. He realized they had a mage, and Fordon shouted about it. He shouted for the 2 of them to flee into the forest immediately, but at that moment, the mage also destroyed Fordon, striking him in the chest, causing his blood to spill. Lucas, afraid for him, cried out his name, after which Forden began to fall, and the bandit declared that he was a freak, that he had killed his comrade, and that he would fry him to a crisp. Fordon still stood and said he would protect the lord and lady even at the cost of his life. Lucas realized that Fordon was only a 2nd-level martial artist and wouldn't be able to stand against the mage. He really didn't want to reveal his true strength, but Forden was kinder to him than anyone except his parents, and was practically his family, so he couldn't just stand by and watch as his family was killed. He clenched his fist and told Julia to hide. He would help Forden. He punched the ground, and Julia responded, understanding that he should be careful. At that moment, many bandits had already been destroyed, but a moment later, the protagonist also destroyed the mage who had nearly killed Forden. He fell to his knees, trembling in terror, when suddenly another bandit pounced on him with a sword in his hands, but a moment later he was destroyed. Fordon didn't understand what had happened and turned around in horror. None of the bandits understood what had happened, and at that very moment, they too were destroyed by beams of light conjured by Lucas. He held a magic stone in his hand and chanted, "It's good he'd reached level 4 assault strike, simply by attracting birds in the sky for the effort." Destroying a couple of level 1 bandits was a piece of cake. They screamed in trembling voices, "Damn, who did this?" They were killed instantly. The bandit shouted at the old man that he would take him with him, and swinging at him, tried to kill Forden, who was chanting that he didn't even have the strength to return, but thanks to his help, the children would live. Forden smiled and murmured, "Thank God." And at that moment, Lucas protected him with his powers, jumping right in front of him. When Forden saw this, he shed tears of fear and horror, and realized it was the young master who had done it. When Lucas appeared in front of the mage, he asked, could it be that his fireball had been blocked? Even so, he could still attack him with icy flames. When Lucas suddenly replied that he was already finished and struck him in the chest with his bright flames, the mage screamed in pain and horror and a moment later was dead. Forden was horrified and confused. What had he just done? A small boy instantly killed a high-level mage, and it was simply unheard of. Lucas turned around and said that he seemed to have a talent for martial arts. Forden began to sob, when suddenly he noticed something strange behind him. A monster appeared, approaching them, and no one understood what it was. This creature was so strange in appearance that they felt disgust. The monster screamed at him to die, and Lucas was dumbfounded. He realized it was a thing. He couldn't let Julia see such a frightening monster, and he needed to destroy it immediately. He began to struggle and jumped up, swinging his fist at the monster, then hit it on the head and saw that the flames had stopped glowing. He abruptly twisted and was thrown aside. The monster grabbed the bandits' corpses with its chains and took them with it. Lucas didn't understand what kind of monster this was. The monster roared loudly, and Lucas asked if this was a sign of controlling the dead. When the creature absorbed the bodies, it began to turn around. Lucas said that if his normal attacks weren't working, he'd have to try this. The monster also moved to attack him, but the protagonist didn't give up and aimed at the creature. He used an aura explosion, causing everything around him to glow with bright flames, and the monster retreated several meters. A moment later, it burst into flames and evaporated. When Lucas destroyed the monster, he sat down on the ground and breathed a sigh of relief. Julia ran up to him and shouted, "Brother!" She hugged him and asked, "Did he really defeat all the bad guys? He's so cool, bro." Forden still didn't understand what had just happened and scratched his head in bewilderment. Suddenly, Lucas heard a horse making noise, and the horse led a girl who was tied up and trembling with fear. When Lucas noticed her, he was horrified. Meanwhile, in the monster girl's lair, there were many hanged people. She grinned and asked, "So? Number 44 is out. And who did all this?" She rose from her seat and said that restoring her power with her own power was now a priority while bathing in blood. After some time, Julia introduced herself to the girl and said her name was Maya Rasta. Forden remarked that he'd heard that name somewhere, and Julia said she thought so too. They sat by the fire to warm up, and Lucas explained that it was all because of the Rasta and Ren families, two houses that lived near the city of Daku. The girls understood that's what it was, and Julia asked, by the way, how did it happen that bandits attacked her? Maya suddenly burst into tears and said that a few hours ago, bandits had suddenly appeared and attacked their carriage. They roared with laughter and slaughtered all the knights and her guards. Her maid had been brutally murdered while trying to protect her, and no matter how many times she told them she was a noblewoman, their goal was to kidnap them, the noble children. Julia replied that everything was fine and they were already dead, and Lucas remained silent. The young master said that Lady Maya and Miss Julia had already gone to bed. He asked what he thought of what Lady Maya had said. He replied that he thought these bandits were serial criminals, and most likely only targeted the sons and daughters of noble families. The protagonist thought that bandits who could use magic and the incredible ability to control the dead was amazing. Forden turned around in fear and said that it seemed a terrible demon was controlling everything. He will immediately report this to the master, so please let him not worry. If they report Lady Maya's situation to the Rasta family, they will probably be able to establish cooperation with them. This is a good point, and by the way, he has a suggestion to avoid problems. The next day in the Carmina Empire border region, the city of Daku, people started shouting, "What? Are they canceling all their plans to see the sights of Daku? Some bandits may still be in the city, and for their own safety, it is better to go straight to the Magic Academy." Julia was upset, and Lucas asked her to please understand. This is for their and Maya's safety. Maya replied that this is true and she agrees with it. Julia was very upset and did not answer. Lucas smiled, looking at her and asked, "She wanted to go out with food, right? When they pass by, he will buy her whatever she wants." Julia was happy and thanked him for this. Maya chuckled at the fact that they get along so well. Forden announced that they had already entered the city. Would they like to open the window and look around? When they did so, they were stunned by the beautiful views. The city was incredibly beautiful, with remarkable buildings. There were many people, and it was noisy. So this was the largest city after the capital, and Maya noted that it was very lively. And Lucas confirmed that this was true. The atmosphere in the city was similar to where he lived in his past life. Suddenly, a masked man appeared in front of them, offering them to take the item while it was hot. Everything looked quite delicious, and a moment later, they had stocked up on food from the store. The girls tried various sweets and were delighted. Lucas watched them with a smile on his face, and when the pile grew thick, he announced that he could not take them any further. Lucas told him not to worry, because he would protect Julia. She replied that it was true, and that she would also protect her brother. Lucas stroked her head and said he was counting on her, a magical genius. She smiled and asked him to leave it to her. Forden watched them from the sidelines with tears in his eyes, finding it hard to let them go. Maya wondered, was his little sister protecting him? What an interesting guy he was. A moment later, the three of them entered the school grounds, and Maya realized they were both very kind. She was so glad to have met these brother and sister. Maya looked at Lucas's face, embarrassed, and was happy. At that moment, Lucas remembered Forden saying that he now remembered Lady Maya was his fiancée. When they were children, they were so close, and it was a pleasure to watch them. But later, when it turned out that the gods had rejected him and his magical talent, the engagement was annulled. The Alai Magic Academy in the south of Daku City, one of the most famous schools in the Carmina Empire, is located in the city. All first-year students must pass an entrance exam, and based on their results, they are divided into houses. The faculty of Earth, Fire, Wind, and Water. If they can survive the full 6 years and graduate, they'll earn the qualification of a mage. Of course, this is a special exception for special students, and any student who passes the mage certification exam during their studies can graduate early without completing the full 6 years. Lucas noticed something was wrong, and Julia said, "That's too bad." She'd hoped they'd let her take the entrance exam with Maya. In the end, Maya went to the entrance exam first, accompanied by her family. Now that her family is with her, she's safe. If they pass, they'll become classmates and see each other every day. But for now, he suggests focusing on the entrance exam. Julia replied that he was right. So where's the registration? People around them started commenting on them. How cute. Did she come to the exam too? No way. She looks 12 tops. Her brother is also handsome, and they look alike. God, how he wants a cutie sister like her. At that moment, Mina, the vice president of the student council at RN Magic Academy, approached her. She asked if Julia had snuck in here with her older brother. Julia replied that she was there to take the exam with him. This greatly surprised the vice president, who wondered inwardly, was she taking the exam too? Could she really be the girl who had proposed to the elite class? This thought pleased her, and she asked, "Isn't her name Julia from the Ryan family?" Julia asked again, how did she know her name? Mina said that she would find out soon, and for now, she would take them to the registration desk. Lucas was surprised that she simply ignored him, and Julia turned her attention to him and said that her brother needed to register too. She completely forgot about him and told Lucas, "He's applying to the martial arts department, right?" At that moment, he heard people start discussing whether there were still idiots who were into that kind of thing. It was hilarious that someone would come all the way to RN Magic Academy just to study martial arts. At least martial arts are a little more useful than magical beasts. He understood that these self-confident views didn't change anything, even at RN Academy. All the mages are convinced they're superior to martial artists, but in reality, they're just a bunch of weaklings, just like Jeremy and that monster. To him, they're no better than insects, and if it weren't for the kindness of his parents, he wouldn't be wasting his time here. At that moment, Mina tensed and realized it was because she'd said it out loud. She said, "Lucas, she'll take him to the exam hall as soon as he finishes registering." He thought to himself that this girl was different and didn't look down on him. Lucas thanked her and said he appreciated it. After a while, when everyone had gathered in the designated area, Mina announced that they should please hand their registration form to a member of the student council. Here are their emblems. Their exam numbers are written on it, so they must wear them when they enter the hall. First, they'll measure their magical potential. Then there'll be a test of their compatibility with spirits of different elements. And finally, a test in which they measure the destructive power of their magic on a dummy. Lucas asked, "Do candidates for the martial arts department follow the same rules?" Mina replied, "Yes, the entrance exam is the same for all departments to ensure fairness." Lucas wondered, is this really fair? Or are they just too lazy to create a specialized exam for the martial arts department? At that moment, he flexed his hands and replied that he understood everything. He thought he could brag a little to get rid of any prejudices about martial arts students. At the place where the magical potential was measured, the old mage announced that everything was fine and they were beginning the first test. Candidates should please place their hands on the magical light, one at a time. When the old man noticed someone passing by, Lucas realized he'd never seen anything like this before. It's a 1 in 100, maybe even 1,000 chance. He has zero potential, after all. And it's not a prosthetic arm. A martial arts candidate with a result like that, he wouldn't even pass the martial arts department. He realized it was happening again and turned away from them. One guy was surprised. Was he really seeing the purple light? Purple signifies a potential of 7 out of 10. At that moment, Julia approached the orb. She was one of this year's top candidates. Lucas turned around and watched everyone's surprise. He shouted at Julia that she could let loose today, and she responded positively. The old man was surprised. What did hold back mean? At that moment, the orb glowed with a bright fiery flame and illuminated the entire auditorium. The boys were stunned when they saw her power, and the old man realized she was in a golden land, just one step short of level 10. 2 years ago, there had already been a student with golden light, but this girl was much younger. What incredible talent. Julia shouted to her brother that she had succeeded, and she ran up to hug him and asked, "She's excellent, right?" He replied, "Yes, she is wonderful, Julia. One day, she will become a magnificent mage." At that moment, the boys standing nearby were discussing how a genius mage and a talentless loser are brother and sister, and how amazing it is. Another guy shut him up and told him to keep quiet, because he didn't know what that girl could do to him if he insulted her brother right in front of her. If he wanted to make fun of someone, he should choose someone else. He shouldn't call himself that because of some loser. Lucas thought that everything had happened as he planned. Julia screamed that if they bullied her brother, she would never forgive them. If she showed her talent, he could live a peaceful student life, and it seemed all the effort he'd put in these 3 years to strengthen Julia's talent hadn't been in vain. His ability, magic enhancement, and further, was an old test. Please, they must go to the spirit hut. Today is the day when all his work will pay off. He entered the room holding Julia's hand, expectant and hopeful. A multitude of different spirits had gathered in the ability testing hall. The students turned their attention to them and looked at what was happening in surprise. Several such spirits had gathered around Julia, and she controlled them with a smile. The guys are discussing how not even an air spirit approached him, despite him having a 6th level blessing from the god of wind. But all the spirits approached her. Does that mean she has the highest compatibility with all types of magic? This girl is incredibly talented. Lucas smiled as he looked at her and thought that this was good. The skill he created, the magic meridian technique, safely increases Julia's potential. She's only 2 levels up, but that's enough to advance. Julia Ryan's compatibility is 9.6, the highest of all the candidates. One of the academy staff congratulated her, and Julia thanked him for it. At that moment, she felt dark energy from the people who called her cute and offered to be friends. Julia was frightened and grabbed her brother, hugging him. Lucas asked, "What happened?" She asked again, "Why were all these people looking at her like that?" She became scared. Lucas told her that nothing could be done about it. After all, she was a genius, Julia. From now on, she would often have to face such looks. Let her not worry about what others think, and just slowly get used to it. Julia replied that he was right. She must grow strong to protect him, brother. He told her that everything was correct and that she should try to do so. He didn't think Julia cared so much about others' opinions. He should help her gain confidence and courage. The people around her were discussing everything that was happening between brother and sister. With such a student, they initially thought she was of royal blood. But her brother was useless, so he didn't think so. But what was her brother's compatibility level? Probably 0 again. The spirits tried to escape from him when he entered the hall. They were simply disgusted. But does he know that something strange happened after the second test? When he left, the fire spirit almost dissolved, and he was so scared. No, spirits are tiny, and he probably just imagined it. This could be so. But Lucas overheard their conversation and realized that he didn't think there would be witnesses during the first test. Maybe it's because the fire god hates him. The fire spirit behaved disgustingly, and when he finished, he was almost gone. He spat fire at him. For this trouble, for the attempted murder, it was very much like him. A pathetic servant of fire has no right to treat him like this. He grabbed his sister by the hand and told her to go to the final test. She thinks she can get first place again? Julia replied that, as long as he was fine, she would be fine too. He smiled and replied that he would be fine, but still, he had to protect her. Gold was testing destruction magic, and inside was a metal dummy. And everyone was gathering together. The guys were discussing how it was so annoying that a genius like her was taking all the first places, so they would relieve their stress on this dummy. But what if this genius broke the dummy? The guys shouted that it was impossible, because this dummy was made of a special metal tempered with defensive spells, so it will withstand any such blow below the cursed class. It's impossible for a child his age to produce such a curse. Lucas thought that this dummy really did look tough. This was a great chance to test his level 6 skills. It's good he goes to school when he can use such expensive equipment. At that moment, someone behind him shouted, "Don't cut in here in line." It was a detached girl, shouting that those without talent should go back. Let them go, infirmities. At that moment, the girl's eyes glowed bright red, and she saw right through her opponent's heart. She turned sharply and was surprised to see Julia. Then she approached her and asked, "Isn't she the one who got compatibility level 9.6? Julia was frightened by her appearance when she looked into her eyes and called out to her brother. She said she was a scary lady and hid behind him. Lucas asked, "Who is she?" She replied that she was the emperor's granddaughter, Iva Miranda. Lucas was surprised that it was her. This family is one of the 3 great houses in the northern part of the empire, and they are the family that once produced a legendary mage. The girl's mother, Kyria Catherine, was one of the 7 Mirandas. So it turns out that this girl is the daughter of the younger brother and his mother, Sina Miranda. He asked how old she was. Iva replied that she was 15, and Lucas asked her not to look at him like that, and they were cousins. Iva was angry because she had never heard of any cousins. How rude. She would humiliate him in front of everyone. At that moment, she looked at his face and became so heated that she used her energy and decided, let him take off his clothes and start dancing pathetically right here. She thought she would force him to do it, but Lucas simply smiled and stood in front of her. Iva was dumbfounded and didn't understand what was happening, and Lucas said that using mind control magic on a relative she had just met was strange. What kind of education did the Miranda family give her? He winked at her, and she realized that it didn't work, but it was her best spell. Lucas asked if she really thought she could control a martial artist with such a childish spell. At that moment, the host announced that Lucas Ryan was next and should please get ready. He replied that he had to go, and turning to Julia, Iva yelled at him not to act like a fool. She would take first place in this test. At that moment, Lucas approached the table and realized that Iva was in second place and had come to declare war on Julia, who was in first place. He'd forgive her, but for the sake of his peace of mind, Julia couldn't give up first place. Iva offered Julia a candy and handed it over. Julia ate it immediately, but Lucas helped drain all the energy from her, and Julia realized he'd lied. It wasn't candy, but a super bitter medicine. Lucas apologized to her and said it was made from rare ingredients. She'd soon see the effects herself. After a while, he was told he had to go, and Lucas said he'd work on the taste next time, so he was going now. Julia knelt down and cried, because that's what he'd said last time, and she didn't believe him anymore. When Lucas approached the dummy, the host told him to attack it with all his might. They would calculate the destructive power and give him a final score. He could start, when Lucas suddenly said he couldn't use magic and turned to him in surprise. Lucas smiled and said, "Would it be okay if he just hit it?" The guys were discussing among themselves that he was going to create a destructive magic exam manually, with a punch. Martial arts were some kind of barbarism. He'd probably just break his arm. Julia, who heard about all this, became angry, and the guys were scared, because they'd forgotten that he had a sister who was a magical genius. Julia thought that if her brother hadn't told her to behave well at the academy, she would have beaten them up already. Her fist shook with anger, and Iva asked, does her brother really not use magic? Her awareness magic doesn't work on him, and she can't believe that he can't use magic. Julia replied that her brother couldn't cast magic, but he was still incredible. Iva realized she wasn't making fun of her brother, and that she really was a good person, even though she had been a bit scary at first. A martial artist's power couldn't outdo magic, and apparently he was lying. At that moment, a bright explosion occurred, and everyone turned in surprise as the dummy had been destroyed. No one understood what had happened. 2 minutes earlier, when Lucas had asked if he could hit, the mage had replied that they didn't limit him in his attack methods. Lucas replied that he understood everything. Every time his level increased by 3, his currently strongest skill, the fast-acting flash, significantly improved in speed. Now that he had reached level 6, his power must have increased. He stepped on the ground and immediately rushed to attack. When he swung his powerful fist, the dummy tensed, and a moment later, he knocked it aside with a light punch. The dummy was thrown far away and destroyed. By the time the dust cleared, the guys couldn't believe it. Eva realized the speed rivaled high-level wind magic, and the dummy glowed golden, meaning the attack was curse level. The guys reasoned that, despite being just an incompetent martial artist, he still managed to hit the dummy. Apparently, she was the only one who noticed Lucas's true strength. Judging by his actions, he wanted to hide it. What a terrifying guy he was. He scratched his head and said he was lucky. It was the first time in 1,000 years someone had broken a dummy. He'd give it a perfect score. Lucas thanked him and asked if he should remove the fallen dummy. He said no, it was too heavy, and he'd remove it with magic. Let him go first. At that moment, the protagonist found himself on the 405th list, and Julia showed him off. He avoided it and maintained his strength undetected, thanks to everyone who looked down on him. As the exams progressed, fewer and fewer students focused on Lucas's destructive power, but everyone was amazed by Julia's extraordinary talent. She easily used her magic and defeated the dummy with a lightning strike. When she struck it with a flash of light, people shouted that red lightning was second only to the highest level gold lightning in power. It's no wonder lightning magic is considered the best offensive magic. One of the girls was discussing the surprising level of the scholarship student. If they could achieve the same level by graduation, that would be enough. At that moment, Julia sat down, and the guys wondered if her legs had buckled from how powerful her lightning had been. Julia looked ahead in surprise, and her result was 9.5. Now it was time for the next one to go. And it was Iva. Julia reported that when she used her lightning strike, it suddenly turned red, and it scared her. Previously, even at full power, she could only create purple lightning. The lightning itself felt brighter, and something was wrong. Lucas awkwardly thought that it was all thanks to that candy he gave earlier. It temporarily boosted a mage's abilities, but maybe he shouldn't tell her that yet. In this world, both mages and martial artists possessed medicinal abilities. Mages created magical potions, while martial artists created alchemical remedies. Magic potions required items to consume, while alchemical remedies could be ingested directly. In the past, many remedies were created, but with the decline of martial arts, alchemy became increasingly difficult. Many modern martial artists could create remedies for mana storage, like the one Julia had enhanced. Because creating such a remedy requires a 6th level alchemy, in this era, there was only one other person who could do it. This is the Imperial Minister of Martial Arts, the only 9th level martial artist, Duke Retsuzan, and even the greatest mages bow to him to obtain the medicine that preserves mana. If anyone finds out he can do the same, it will cause trouble, and he is obliged to keep it a secret. After all, he has a 6th level alchemy. After some time, Julia sat down with her brother on a bench and asked if they were finished yet. He replied to wait a little longer. As soon as the class distribution was announced, they would return at 6 to rest. At that moment, Miss Mina called them and waved. Lucas asked why she was there. She replied that she had come to publish the class distribution results, and the two of them had taken first place in the elite class and the martial arts department, respectively, so she congratulated them. Julia was delighted and asked if she was first in the elite class. How wonderful that she had made it to the elite class. Lucas replied that she had done excellently and he was counting on her. Mina replied that when she transferred to the next year, which faculty would she like to join? Julia asked again, faculty? Mina replied that they had 5 faculty: the earth, fire, wind, water, and 1 special faculty. After the first year, everyone is sorted based on exam results. Julia replied that based on her attributes, she probably liked wind, and she had received the blessing of thunder. Mina replied that everything was correct and she would wait for her in the wind faculty. Lucas thought that they were already desperately trying to attract the best talent. Mina said that she would take Miss Julia to the girls' dormitory, and she told her brother that they would see each other later. Lucas waved at her and asked her to please look after his sister. And now he would go to the martial arts faculty. As he passed the crowd and the guys, they shouted that the results had been announced, and as expected, Julia Ryan had taken first place. This year's poor freshmen are just dust under this genius's feet. In the end, Ava lost, and someday she too will definitely become first. Lucas and Julia will just wait for her. When Lucas approached the building, he realized it was so dilapidated that they didn't care about the martial arts department at all. Could he really live here? He felt like something was about to collapse. But at least he could live a quiet life without anyone bothering him. At that moment, a guy who had shouted approached him. He was Lucas, the guy in first place in the martial arts department, right? His name was Kaitara. He was also in the martial arts department, and it was nice to meet him. Lucas shook his hand and walked past without saying a word. Kai turned around and caught up with him, saying how cool it was when he sent that dummy flying. Lucas replied that he was just lucky and started training. The teacher told him his room was on the 2nd floor, and here were his keys. He gave him the keychain from room 205 and was glad they shared a room so they would go together. Lucas was upset about this, but they came together in the hallway and decided to see where it was. When they found the room, they realized it was there. But when they opened the door, they saw 2 more guys there. They greeted him and said it was nice to meet him. One of them was named Collins, and they were neighbors from today. Sharp also said hello and gave his name. Lucas was dumbfounded when he saw the conditions they would be living in and didn't understand what was happening to this room. Kai started screaming that it was worse than a pigsty and covered his nose because of the terrible smell. He saw a spider and started screaming, Lucas, is he really going to stay in such a disgusting room? Lucas thought that this rich kid was a real pain, and at that moment, Kai picked up his coin and shouted that he would give it to whoever cleaned the room. The guys were dumbfounded and shouted, yes, sir. Lucas thought it was so careless to offer an amount significantly exceeding a commoner's monthly salary just for cleaning. He really was from the Thoroy family, one of the 3 great noble houses in the north of the empire. Kai started shaking and said he hadn't been told they'd be living practically in a stable. Lucas replied that it was a well-known fact, the Aaron Magic Academy, and he was sure everything would work out. The guy confirmed he was right, but suddenly started screaming. It's a prison cell. When he saw another spider and hid behind Lucas, he replied that if he kept talking like that, the student council members would throw him out. After a while, their room was sparkling clean, and Kai said that it was excellent, and here were their rewards. He handed them several gold coins and said that from now on, as their neighbor, he would protect them, the guys. He also had connections in Daku City. The guys were delighted to receive the coins, and Lucas reflected that he wasn't a priest, but the god of wealth on the continent of Arcana. When a faculty representative entered, he announced that he had brought their uniforms. The entrance ceremony would be held in the hall, so they should change and go there. The uniform was also in terrible condition, and Kai yelled hysterically, "What the hell is that rag? He'd look like a bum if he wore that." The guys looked at the clothes with bewilderment and remarked that it wasn't that bad. Lucas replied that he thought they'd explain everything at the entrance ceremony, but apparently the academy has a system for reviewing student complaints. If they ask them to improve their living conditions here, maybe they'll even let them change their uniforms. Kai got angry and said yes, they'll hurry to the gym. Lucas thought he was being very trusting. After a while, the guys gathered in the gym with their new uniforms and looked around. Lucas started going down, and the guys were amazed at how luxurious the gym was. Kai replied that compared to his home, it was something else. Lucas looked around and didn't understand. Where was Julia? Kai asked, was he looking for his sister? The elite class was in the front row, so he should look there. Julia was wearing incredibly beautiful clothes and was sitting there. Kai realized that the elite class uniform really was very different. The martial arts students sat in the back, so if he wanted to talk to his sister, he should go there now. Lucas replied that everything was fine, so they would go to their seats. He was glad that Julia looked great in her uniform. Their seats were so far away, and only they were treated so differently. As Lucas sat down, he noticed a girl sitting nearby. She was silently watching and observing the proceedings. Suddenly, a huge magical flower appeared in the arena, and the boys tensed. It was level 6 magic, and the event host announced that Aran Academy was pleased to welcome new students. Today, the student council president, the future great mage, Theo Folomel, would introduce them to the academy's point system. Everyone was discussing how awesome he was and looking at him lovingly. He was surprised. He was already a level 6 mage before graduating, but wasn't he a genius? Lucas didn't react at all. Theo explained that here at the Magic Academy, almost everything is based on the point system. Magic skills are rare books, magical beasts are rare materials, and even the instructions of the great master they are being taught are available to them. they can obtain any educational resource for points. There are many ways to earn points, but the points they receive for work are small, only 1 to 5 points for a part-time job. It's more effective to earn points by participating in each house's events than by simply working. In fact, mentoring new students today is an excellent opportunity for current students to earn points. Lucas realized that's why. Also, if they become a student council member, they will receive a generous monthly point income. For example, the president receives 500 points per month, the vice president 200 points per month, and a member 100 points per month. And although this is quite risky, there is also the option of hunting monsters. Behind the school is a mountain known for being teeming with magical beasts. If they hunt monsters and hand over the materials, they will receive a corresponding number of points. For example, the mountain range with monsters is his personal training ground. Lucas was delighted by this. A few hours later, the scent of the candles spread throughout the room while Kai slept. The scent of silence lulled his neighbors, and he could finally go hunting on the mountain. Lucas realized the martial arts department was behind the academy and jumped from the window. When he reached the back of the dormitory, he realized that if he climbed over that wall, he'd end up on the mountain with the monsters. He immediately leaped over it with incredible ease and flew straight toward the forest. When he landed, he was immediately thrown aside as a monster flew past him, and Lucas grabbed it by the head and destroyed it in an instant. As the monster lay motionless, it roared loudly, and Lucas remarked, "What a huge horned toad." The poisonous horns of the black toad are often used in potion making. They must be worth a lot of points. People say the Magic Academy houses a legendary collection of martial arts books. He needs to earn points to gain the skill of the so-called martial arts god. He didn't have much time, and first he'd figure out the location of the magical beasts. He covered his face with his hands, and at that moment, magical beams of light began to emanate from him. A level 1 rat began to roar loudly, and Lucas immediately noticed it and struck it, saying, "Let it rest." A level 2 one-eyed bat was also destroyed by his hands, as was his level 3 fire leopard. Thus, he trained and destroyed monsters all night. Stopping, Lucas said how much he'd collected today. Besides being able to exchange many for points, he could also use some for alchemy, and yet it was somehow suspiciously quiet. He gathered his bag and realized he barely sensed the presence of the magical beasts. Perhaps there was a powerful magical beast nearby? He closed his eyes, and using his powers, sensed something nearby in the cave. A dark blue flame emanated from it, where the monster was located. He realized he'd found what he needed, and jumping from tree to tree, reached the right place. The distance was about 1 kilometer, assuming he sensed it too. Power emanated from within the cave, and when Lucas reached the beast, he saw it was a huge wolf. It was a level 6 ice flame wolf. Lucas smiled and said he understood. It was because it was a wolf that he was protecting its territory. He swung his fist and shouted, "Let's get started. Let it have it now." The wolf struck him with a magical block of ice, causing his fist to freeze. When the creature bared its teeth, Lucas struck it with an icy fist and threw the monsters aside. He needed more training before he could rip that leg off for good. A moment later, the ice dissolved on his hand, and he told the wolf to get up if it could still do so. The wolf opened its mouth and released a huge fireball, illuminating everything around and creating a magical fire dust that spread throughout the cave and forest. When the wolf created this, it completely transformed and growled. The wolf turned its attention to Lucas, who stood nearby, and punched the creature right in the belly again. A moment later, the monster began coughing up blood. Lucas continued to use all his strength to destroy his opponent and eventually fell unconscious. Lucas had so freely controlled the opposing elements of ice and fire, but at that moment the wolf regained consciousness again, but was startled when Lucas approached it and remarked on what a rare beast it was. But the wolf wasn't going to give up so easily. It released a mixture of fire and ice at Lucas, creating steam to block his vision. By the time MC had dissipated the steam, the wolf had escaped. He immediately gave chase, quickly caught up with it, grabbed it by the tail, and threw the beast over himself, causing it to hit the ground. Lucas glanced at the wolf's tail and thought with a smile, he enjoys fighting a strong beast so much, it must be worth a lot of points. Suddenly, the wolf swung its tail sharply and threw him back, causing him to hit the wall with a crash. Immediately after, the wolf released flames at him, but he managed to move to the ceiling, avoiding the blow, and then the beast fired fireballs at him. Dodging each bolt of magic, he ordered the beast to stand still, and then delivered a powerful punch with his fist, and again, driving it into the ground. Cracks spread throughout the cave. The poor wolf endured his blows and thought, is he gonna die here? He has no choice. He will have to resort to extreme measures. Suddenly he stood up. MC thought he would attack, but he simply bowed to him and handed over his magical sources, the cores. Sometimes magical beasts of this world are born with a magical core inside their bodies. These are rare magical materials that contain life force, but if even a drop of human blood touches the core, the beast recognizes that person as its master. He asked, so he's offering to become his familiar? The beast whined in response, and he decided to accept it and thought, this is such an unexpected acquisition. Even among magicians, few have a 6th level familiar, but this one doesn't seem very smart. Truly strong magical beasts are too proud to obey humans. He pricked his finger, dropped a drop of blood on each core, then handed them back to the wolf, who absorbed them. He called him his master, and in surprise, he began to look around, looking for the one speaking, and the wolf called out to him again. Lucas was surprised. Now he could understand his speech. He stroked his muzzle and called him a good boy. From now on, he would call him All. The wolf didn't object, and he wondered if this meant that this land was his now. He wondered if he had gotten anything from his hunts. All understood his thoughts. He immediately pulled away from him and led him to the treasure room. MC smiled at his intelligence, and as they walked, he smelled a putrid smell. The treasure room contained the entire skin of a 6th-level magical beast, the bones of a powerful monster, and even precious stones. This truly was a treasure trove. Lucas began to examine each item with delight, and Ool wondered what he was doing. This isn't his treasure. He called him over. It turns out his treasure was just a piece of meat, but MC was focused on something else right now. All the yard beasts here are at least level 3, and there are even 2 that are level 6. The wolf noticed his interest in the cores and said that he ate the water and fire stones to level up. Lucas thought, to level up, you need to eat the core of a magical beast of the same level or higher. So he killed at least 2 opponents of his level, which is pretty good. He threw a few pills into his mouth as a reward, and he immediately felt a surge of strength. MC told him that this is medicine that works on magical beasts, so let him rest and guard the treasure. Ol was very excited about his first mission, and now Lucas decided to do something else. In the morning, he went to class, took his seat, and yawned widely. In the end, he had to stay up all night, but thanks to the soothing aromas of incense, he feels rested. He tried to count the treasures, but Ol kept getting in his way. The clock struck 8 a.m., and the teacher was nowhere to be found. He had to wait for the first years in the classroom for their first lesson. Kai asked if they had forgotten to assign a teacher for the martial arts department. He said that simply couldn't be, and then a noise came from the hallway. The teacher ran quickly to the classroom. He dropped the bottle in his drunken stupor, threw open the doors, and ran into the classroom, immediately introducing himself. His name was Shigart, and he was the homeroom teacher of the martial arts department. MC frowned at him, wrote his name on the board, picked up a book, and yawned. Kai frowned and whispered to Lucas if he was really their homeroom teacher. He was a slob. A piece of chalk immediately flew into his face, and he cried out in pain, while MC sighed heavily. The other students didn't even notice what the teacher had done. Only Lucas did. He moves quickly, most likely a 5th or 6th level martial artist. The teacher said that from now on, such private conversations are forbidden without his permission. He will check attendance right now. He said Taishi's name. She raised her hand, and Lucas was next. He remembered her. He saw her at the entrance ceremony. While everyone else was delighted, she sat quietly, thereby standing out greatly. After finishing the roll call, the teacher closed his notebook and was about to begin the lesson, but he forgot his textbook, and since he was lazy, he appointed Taishi as class representative and told her to go to his office and get her textbooks. She was very surprised by his decision, and then Kai jumped up from his seat and objected. The class representative must be appointed as the result of a fair election between candidates. He, who has the pedigree and ability, will become the class representative. Chalk flew into his face again, and Shigart threateningly reminded him that private conversations are forbidden in his class. He left the office and told Taishi that when she hands out the textbooks, she should tell everyone to study on their own. She stood up excitedly and smiled. Not only had she passed the entrance exam, but she had also been chosen as the class representative. She should take this chance and change her destiny. Meanwhile, Kai was crying in pain and from how cruel this teacher was, and the MC said that he was a little strange. Kai suggested that he report this to the administration so that he could be fired, but he remained silent and thought, judging by his gait, one could judge that he had once received a serious injury. How strong was he before? Having such a person as a homeroom teacher was much more interesting than he thought. He told his friend that he would not report him to the administration, and he asked discontentedly, how could he still call himself a man after that? A few hours later, in front of the cafeteria, they left the lesson and Kai, irritably kicking every pebble in his path, said that this stupid teacher really made them study on their own all morning. It's so irresponsible to appoint a class representative on a whim. He's just a terrible teacher. Lucas ignored him and went straight to his sister. He patted her on the head and asked how their first lesson went. She told him that their homeroom teacher, Miss Linda, was so sweet. She motivated her to become class representative next year. Kai was still annoyed by what happened in class, and she asked if the martial arts department had chosen a representative yet. She hoped they'd chosen her brother. He told her that he wasn't the representative after all, but that didn't matter now. They needed to go have lunch. They said the cafeteria food was delicious. Julia was overjoyed at the prospect of filling her belly, and Kai tagged along. At Aaron Magic Academy, even meals are strictly governed by a points system. A long-standing policy has led to this situation. First years can exchange money for points, but only once, and the amount that can be exchanged varies depending on the house. Julia enjoyed her meal, from cakes to juicy meat and a plate of fruit. She enthusiastically offered her brother some of this deliciousness, and Kai was almost in tears because he only got stale bread. They all paid 1 coin, but the elite class gets 100 points, and the martial arts department gets 10. This is simply outrageous. Recently, a guy went to the food counter to get food, but the teacher told him that the martial arts department is allocated 10 points. If he wants to complain, he should do it outside. Even they openly discriminate against their house. Here, it doesn't matter whether you're a noble or a commoner. Untalented students must constantly accumulate points. That's what the teachers always say. It seems that since coming here, he even lost his human rights. Noticing how upset he was, Julia touched his hand and handed him a plate of food, saying that he could try it too. He burst into tears of happiness, and from her kindness, he accepted the plate of food without hesitation, and MC thought that he was overreacting. While they were enjoying their meal, Maya came to their table and greeted them. Julia invited her to eat with her, and she replied that she had already eaten. She baked cookies to thank them. Maybe they would like to try them? Julia took one and thanked her for the treat, and Lucas tried it and remarked that they were indeed very tasty. Julia told him that Maya was really good at cooking, and she watched them with a smile, glad that they liked it. Kai also didn't miss the chance to try the delicacy and said it was on par with the Taroi family's sweets. He also decided to get to know the girl. They introduced themselves, and she thanked him for the praise. Afterward, he glanced at his friend with a mischievous smile and asked, when did he manage to meet such a beauty? MC sighed heavily. He couldn't say she was his ex-fiancée, could he? After that, she left, and Lucas breathed a sigh of relief and thought, you can run into a lot of people you know in the cafeteria. He remembered meeting Mina, then Theo, who even flew inside the building using fire magic. He was such a show-off. He once heard him sigh languidly while drinking mana potions. In fact, he lacked the strength to use 6th level magic. He just wanted to show off in front of the second years. Until he heard that muttering after the ceremony, he, too, thought he was incredible. The sound of a dropped bottle sounded behind him. Shigart, the teacher, had come to get himself some alcohol and left the cafeteria. Reveling in it until his face was flushed, he headed to the assembly hall. As always, he was late, which irritated the others. Someone said he thought the leadership of the martial arts department would at least change him a little, but nothing could be done after what happened. Ignoring them, Shigart took his place at the table and yawned, and Linda looked at him with pity. Frowning, she turned away from him, and the meeting finally began, the training tournament on the agenda. Linda said, here, in the Carmina Empire, which is often attacked by magical beasts, the ability to train several of them simultaneously is in high demand. Traditionally, all first-year students participate in the Magical Beast Training Tournament every year. They have already prepared over 200 first-level magical beasts for the competition. As always, it will last 6 days. Greg said that all this is, of course, good. The martial arts department doesn't have to participate. They can't handle the magical beasts anyway, so why waste their time? Shigart slammed his palm on the table, objecting to this, and he responded by saying that he was simply caring about the students. Linda cut him off, saying that since they were first years at their academy, the martial arts department should also participate. Everyone else agreed with her. All students should be treated equally. He looked at them in bewilderment and wondered if there were any teachers left who agreed with him, especially Linda. Do they really think he's level 8? He didn't argue any further, although he thought they would simply run away in fear, and the director said, then it's decided. The martial arts department will also participate. After the meeting, Linda's colleagues approached her and asked if she was sure about this. Greg wasn't that wrong. Martial arts require a lot of practice, but magical beast training competitions are too rigorous. Linda smiled back and said, years ago, someone told her that a coward who lacks the courage to overcome failure has no right to call himself a martial artist, and any student who refuses to participate in the competition will definitely be expelled from the faculty. After that, Shigart came to his class and announced that the magical beast training competition would be held in a few days. After class, they would go outside for practical combat training. He would make them strong enough to defeat the beast. Kai asked with displeasure, isn't the magical beast training competition the event that determines the class president? They had already chosen the president, so what's the point of participating? Chalk flew at his forehead again, and the teacher ordered everyone to remain silent. Class was about to begin. The students began whispering that this rich boy was constantly annoying the teacher, and MC became thoughtful. He needed to be careful not to send his sparring partner flying. After class, they went out into the courtyard. Teishi easily dealt with her opponent, throwing her against a tree and then helped her up. Lucas glanced at them and thought, as expected of students who passed the entrance exam to the martial arts department, they have pretty good skills for weaklings. Especially Teishi, she's the strongest here after him. After that blow, the tree fell, and he, completely ignoring his opponent, simply threw it aside. As he thought, Shigart has a keen eye for such things. Shigart said that was all for today. Kai sat down on the grass with relief, and Colin said they were going to the cafeteria. He would bring him food, as promised. Sharp asked, did he make a deal with him again? He asked him to bring food worth 2 points in exchange for 2 coins. Collins makes money, he doesn't spend points. It's a winning deal, right? Sharp was very upset that no one told him about it, and Collins apologized to him. He would give him a chance next time. Kai said that he didn't care who it was, and Sharp was happy. MC looked at them and thought, he wants to earn pocket money, but he also doesn't want to worsen the relationship. He's a very smart guy. Kai approached him and asked, he's smart, right? He leaned on him and told him to watch and learn. He wouldn't take money from him. Lucas threw his hand off his shoulder and politely declined, and then Kai remembered. His sister is in the elite class, so he doesn't have to worry about points. As the moon rose in the sky, MC went hunting and kept thinking about today. He knew that he thought that he depended on Julia, but even without her, he didn't have to worry about food because he received gifts from nature. After defeating another monster, he took refuge in a cave to eat dinner. He put the meat on the fire, and while it was roasting, he thought, if he didn't have to accompany Julia, he could train during dinner. But the vice president, Mina, was trying to get close to her again today. He couldn't let his guard down yet. If she showed even a hint of malice, he would make her regret it. Ole wagged his tail. It turned out he'd been drooling over this juicy piece of aromatic meat this whole time. Lucas decided to share it with him, since he was quite cute, and Ole thought, being a familiar isn't so bad, as long as your master shares food with you for free. MC stood up and flexed his fists, saying that when he finished eating, he would help him with training. He promised he wouldn't get hurt. And then Ole realized that this had its downsides. Meanwhile, at the Ryan estate, Catherine sat alone in the garden, looking at the moon and missing her children. Her husband approached her and asked if she was thinking about them again. She smiled bitterly, noticing that nothing could be hidden from him, and he said, their classes have probably already begun. If she misses them so much, why doesn't she go see them? Tears appeared in her eyes. He said that he would be passing through the city of Daku and could take her with him, and she hugged him and thanked him. She smiled. She was so happy at the thought of soon meeting her children. Meanwhile, a very interesting social evening began at the Grind family estate. Everyone in this estate was naked. Only cloaks covered them. And Jessica arrived there. Everyone immediately noticed her, especially the hostess. Versita spread her arms out to the sides and said that she was so glad she had come. She invited her to sit down, and when she drank, her whole body would begin to glow. She took a glass of wine from the tray, and Versita decided to add the finishing touch. She bled herself and poured some into each person's glass. Everyone immediately enjoyed the sweet drink, after which Versita threw off her robe and announced the start of today's games. Jessica stood to the side, her hand holding the glass trembling. Soon after, she secluded herself with Versita in a private room and told her about the latest news, that an 11-year-old girl had single-handedly destroyed the Black Wind bandits, and that she had received a level 7 blessing. Versita stroked her head and said, it seems the child has inherited the family talent, but a measly level 7 blessing won't be able to defeat number 44. And yet, her son's efforts are bearing no fruit. Jessica bit her lip until it bled, and Versita, lifting her face by the chin, asked, she does want to kill Catherine and her daughter and become the new Baroness, doesn't she? She confirmed it and asked what she should do. The woman smirked, drawing that sign on her body and saying that the moment when a young sprout withers is so beautiful. The next day came. Teishi gathered her classmates outside and said, it seems they have combat training again this morning. Everyone was very upset about this. Their entire bodies ached, so much so that they couldn't sleep. They even started calling the teacher a slave master. Teishi stretched and agreed that it hurt, but they needed to try, all for the sake of getting stronger. But Kai didn't have any pain. His friend was also cheerful and suggested that they were simply more resilient than the others. Kai immediately began to show off, saying that he was the strongest in the class, and Lucas thought, in fact, it's all thanks to the calming essence. Teishi glanced at them with a smile and mentally noted that they had good stamina. At this rate, they could handle even more intense training in the future. They would most likely become strong martial artists. Meanwhile, Kai and Lucas decided to have a friendly sparring match. The boy confidently lunged at his friend, who responded by punching him in the palm, pushing him away. After that, he rushed into the attack and delivered multiple blows, which MC parried. He smirked and remarked that he was quite good, and MC responded in kind. All this time, someone was watching them. Lucas sensed it and glanced over. An old man was sitting by a tree not far from the training ground. MC eyed him closely, and Kai decided to take advantage of this to strike. He confidently lunged forward, but Lucas deftly dodged, causing his friend to fall face first into the grass. He stood up and indignantly told him not to turn away. They would fight until someone won. MC agreed and got ready, and the old man quietly laughed and left. It was Otani. A girl approached him and asked if she should walk him back to the library. He refused, as he wanted to walk back himself, and thought, this young man is so interesting, he hides his true strength. To think, even he cannot fully see his real strength. Lucas, he will remember that name. Several hours passed, classes finally ended, and MC went to the store. Today, Teacher Shigart taught them a massage technique. He demonstrated it on Collins. He practically screamed with pleasure. The effect was incredible, and no one else in the class had muscle pain. Thus, everyone quickly forgot that this morning, only the 4 of them were cheerful. And now it's time for him to start building a new training ground. First, he needs to buy materials for it. The magic shop at the Aaron Magic Academy, one of the 3 greatest schools in the Empire, stocks many rare items not available to the public. Upon entering the shop, he immediately noticed how big it was, just like a shopping mall. And here, too, he had to pay with points. A high-quality mannequin costs 30 points. They have a good selection, but everything is so expensive. It seemed like he'd spend over 100 points a month. Julia doesn't get that many points, so he can't count on her much. For today, mixing magic potions in the bath would be enough for him. Maybe next time he'll exchange materials from All Cave for points. He approached the saleswoman. She was dozing and snoring softly. He loudly placed his bag on the table to wake her up and handed her a card with points. She counted what he took. It came to 5 points in total. He paid for it, and she noticed his uniform. He was a martial arts student. They only got 10 points at the beginning of their training, and he had spent half of them. She gave him his purchases, and as he was heading for the exit, she asked if he was sure he could use them like that. If he used all his points, he would regret it. He smiled and told her he didn't think it would be enough for him, so he would come back soon for more. She thought irritably, why would a martial arts student who didn't even have potions classes need so many? With that attitude towards money, he was definitely a nobleman. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling, saying that this was exactly why she couldn't stand nobles. Night fell. Lucas came to the cave and took a bath with his potions. He took a piece of herbs out of the water and thought, the medicinal effect doesn't just disappear after a bath, so it seemed wrong to him to just throw them away. But he couldn't force someone to drink the water after his bath. A wolf crept up behind him and opened its mouth, baring its fangs. Finally finished, MC got out of the bath and decided to exchange some ingredients for points. It was better for him not to stand out, so he would only take common level 2 materials. While he was getting dressed, he heard strange sounds behind him. It turned out the wolf was drinking water from the bath. He immediately called out to him, asking what he was doing, and he looked up at him guiltily. In that short time, he managed to drink everything, and Lucas looked at him irritably, but he couldn't control the guilty eyes. He only sighed quietly and stroked him, saying that there were benefits too. The water had strengthened his body. Ul was very happy and thanked him, saying that he wanted beef, and he noted with an awkward smile that he was such a glutton. And so the problem of the cost of this bath was solved. Now he decided to exchange these materials for 3 days, 6 times, and then simply carry all the tools he bought at the store to the cave. When he left the store with his purchases once again, the owner remarked that the mannequin looked a bit heavy. She offered to help him with her magic, but he refused. She waved goodbye with a smile, calling him a gifted child, and he thought, it's good that the store owner thinks that he gets all the materials from his family. By the way, the magical beast training competition is coming up soon. Another lesson was held, but Shigart was dissatisfied and asked, are they even taking this seriously? The competition is tomorrow. Don't even think about running, just because they don't like training. If they don't want to participate, let them go home. He approached Sharp and said that he leaves himself open when he raises his leg like that. And now it's Kai's turn. He threw him a displeased look and asked what just happened. He couldn't even beat a chick with such a blow. Kai countered, saying he'd beaten Lucas, Sharp, and Collins. He promptly punched him between the eyes and asked, so the 3 of them lost to this guy? They hesitantly confirmed it, and the teacher clutched his head with a heavy sigh, thinking that's why noble offspring are such a pain in the ass. He waved at Teishi, saying she'd fight Kai, and they stepped out into the clearing. With a confident grin, the boy warned her he wouldn't give in to her. He'd prove right then and there that he was the most worthy of being class president. She wasn't bothered at all and braced herself. Then he charged and struck first. He grinned, thinking he'd hit her, but then he felt a pain in his chest. Teishi quickly struck him, and he immediately countered with a kick, but she blocked it, surprising him greatly. Her foot immediately flew into his face, and she roundhouse kicked him in the head. He felt dizzy. He almost fell, but he pulled himself together and pounced on her, telling her not to underestimate him, but she was too fast. She hit him in the chest with her palm, throwing him several meters away. All the students were surprised. Someone asked, Kai, who has the physical advantage, lost? He thinks he understood why the teacher appointed Teishi as the class representative. Shigart said that the magical beasts will not give in to him. Let them all be more serious. MC thought. Kai was lagging behind from the very beginning and did not defend himself at all. So, Teishi recognized his weakness and won. At this time, she came to him to help him up, and the teacher noticed how upset he was and said, tomorrow each of them will tame at least 1 magical beast. If they can't do this, they will be expelled from the martial arts department. Kai became very nervous, and Shigart left, telling them that this was their last warning. They would train until sunset today. Lucas approached his friend, wanting to tell him something, and then patted him on the shoulder, saying that his defense was really weak. If he fixed it and could find his opponent's weakness, everything would be fine. Kai looked down in embarrassment and exclaimed that he wasn't talking about that at all. He had fallen in love with Teishi. For the first time in his life, a girl beat him, and it was so cool. He'd already thought of a name for their child. The next day, everyone gathered in the Colosseum, amazed by the scale of the building. Kai even wondered how many terrible beasts were beneath them. Students from another house began clicking their tongues in displeasure at their presence, and someone said he didn't know why they were acting so brazenly, attending a competition if they were destined to lose anyway. Shigart, of course, overheard their conversation and said sternly, if they had time to worry about such nonsense, they should review the competition rules. They immediately fell silent, and he and his students took their places. MC looked at him with respect. He didn't think Shigart would stand up for the martial arts students. He felt an oppressive aura coming from the side. Kai was so nervous. Lucas advised him to think of the magical beasts as a teacher, but he didn't understand what he meant, and he whispered, let him imagine himself beating him instead of the beasts. Kai immediately cheered up, even eager to get to the arena. Shigart heard everything, but said nothing. MC asked, do you remember what they talked about yesterday? Low-level magical beasts can't bypass his defense. If he focuses on defense, he will definitely win. Kai nodded, promising not to repeat yesterday's mistakes, and Shigart silently praised Lucas. A large screen appeared in front of everyone, broadcasting the examiner. He said that in this competition, anyone who tames 10 beasts will receive the best score, and whoever kills them will lose all their points. They have 10 minutes. If they get hurt, they should loudly call for the teacher from outside. The competition began. The first pair entered. Julia entered the arena. She looked at the portals with admiration, passed through one of them, and on the other side, the beasts were already waiting for her. Huge rodents. She drew her weapon and thought that most likely everyone had already advanced far inside, and she would not be left behind. She rushed to the attack, struck the rodents with lightning, and the judge said, "All the beasts for the competition are covered in a special potion. When they subdue a beast, bright smoke will emerge from its body." The teachers monitor their condition through magic circles outside the barrier. He told them to count the results of each student and assign points. At that moment, Julia's barrier shook. She came out of it with a satisfied smile, and the teacher wondered in surprise. He didn't miscalculate, did he? She approached her teacher. Linda patted her on the head, praising her for finishing in only 3 minutes. And she wanted to see how her brother was doing, and asked where the martial arts space was. She answered that they would be in space 10. The martial arts students go last, so she would have to wait. She decided to use this time to buy some snacks. Meanwhile, Iva watched her and thought about Lucas. She would see if he could show the same outstanding results as at the entrance ceremony. 2 hours passed. One of the students came out of space and said that he earned only 1 point. They won't transfer them to a lower class, right? His friend reassured him. The classes were assigned at the entrance ceremony. This can't happen. Meanwhile, Kai watched them and nervously said that, aside from the elite class, even the mage students earned 1 point each. Will they really be able to stay in the martial arts department? MC told him not to worry. In terms of ability, they, martial arts students, are no inferior to mages. And Shigart agreed with him, standing in front of the students and telling them not to belittle themselves. No one will be harmed, since level 1 beasts don't harm people. In physical endurance and close combat techniques, they, martial artists, even surpass low-level mages. Let them believe in themselves. They were shocked that the teacher himself was encouraging them, and the class representative returned with news. She had just confirmed that there hadn't been a single injury yet. Many were simply tired, having used up all their mana. She also received important information. For safety, the barrier restricts the beast's movements, so it is impossible to surround the student. So if they think they can't win, just let them run away and look for a weaker beast. They don't have to overwork themselves, but let them take everything seriously. They'll definitely earn points. They thanked her, and Shigart smiled, convinced that choosing her as class representative was the right decision. Greg laughed at them and said that he thought he saw copycats of their class. Just as he thought, this is the martial arts department. Without any ability, they can only resort to sneaky methods for grades, right? Shigart asked what he wanted, and he told him that he simply came to warn him that the martial arts department's turn was coming soon. His students better try really hard, or the martial arts department itself might disappear. Not that anyone cared. A department like that shouldn't even exist. He left, laughing maliciously, and Lucas frowned, acting just like those people who bullied him in his past life. He volunteered to go first, as he had ranked number 1 in the class at the entrance ceremony. Shigart didn't object, but if he was nervous, he could switch with someone else. He immediately declined and confidently declared he would go first, as planned. He would definitely get a perfect score and show everyone who looked down on them what the martial arts department was worth. The students immediately began to support him and rejoice, and Shigart noticed that the atmosphere completely changed in seconds. Kai told Lucas not to forget what Lady Teishi had said, and he replied that he understood everything, but he didn't have to call her lady. Their conversation made the man think they were still such children. 10 minutes later, Lucas went to Space 10, running back and forth, wary of monsters. There was a magic detection circle in the sky. If he avoided it, he wouldn't have to worry about people knowing what was happening inside the barrier. When a magical beast recognizes you as its master, your souls connect, allowing you to communicate and briefly borrow the beast's abilities. Meanwhile, All sensed him using his power and was surprised. The master was clearly stronger than him, so why would he do this? He used it to easily surpass the low-level magical beast. The owl in this space sensed the wolf's power and fled in fear. It hit the barrier, with nowhere else to run, and MC caught up with it. To create a situation in which it would be easier for the other students to subdue the beasts, he needed to break their spirit so that they lost the will to fight. The owl fainted in fear and fell, and Lucas thought, the aura of a high-level beast greatly frightens low-level ones. So Owl's power came in handy. Smoke began to come from the owl, and he thanked the beast for submitting to him so easily. But until he tamed all the magical beasts in the space, he could not allow the beast's smoke to penetrate outside. He immediately dispelled it. The owl woke up and looked at its body in bewilderment, and MC decided to go look for other beasts and told the owl that they would see each other again. The bird was very scared and hoped that they would never see each other again. Now, he was at the very bottom of the rankings, Kai was restless and walked back and forth, worried about him. Julia, calmly eating delicacies, told him that everything would be fine since she received a perfect score. He could too. Greg saw the rankings and said with a smirk that for a martial artist, a 0 score means he can't defeat even the weakest magical beast. That's the difference between mages and martial arts students. His words made the students nervous, and the teacher remained silent. Only Julia stood up for her brother and told him not to dare mock him. He may not be able to use magic, but he is still amazingly talented. Greg gritted his teeth and thought she was crazy to defend the opinions of the martial arts leaders and the elite class. He said that even if she was sure of it, his scores said otherwise. And then the first smoke emerged from the space. Lucas earned 1 point. Everyone immediately rejoiced. At least he would stay in the martial arts department. Greg chuckled. They were so happy about a measly 1 point, when in his department, the maximum was 5. And then the teacher in charge of the barrier sensed more energy from magical creatures. MC earned another 4 points in one go, which shook Greg's confidence, and he thought a pathetic martial arts student got 5 points? The highest score in their class? Impossible. Meanwhile, Lucas decided to take a break. He had intimidated all the magical beasts. Now his classmates could easily earn points. Well, all he had to do was get a perfect grade and get out of here. He charged, hitting the monster, then the second, third, and fourth, earning a ton more points. The owl saw him and was scared. It thought he wouldn't come back. MC hit the bird too, earning the final 10th point. Greg was speechless. Just like that, the martial arts department representative earned a perfect score. His sister had no doubt in him and exclaimed with delight that her brother was so cool. Finally, he emerged from the barrier. Everyone was very surprised by his results, and his sister ran to him, saying that she knew he could do it. Greg was indignant. A first-year martial artist couldn't defeat 10 magical beasts. He turned to Shigart and asked, didn't he put a substitute in his student's place? Julia gave him a displeased look, and just as Shigart was about to say that he hadn't done anything, the teacher stood in front of him and asked, so he means to say that he, as an examiner, accepts bribes and patronizes cheating? Greg immediately fell silent, completely forgetting about the examiners. He shouldn't make enemies with them. He told him that wasn't what he meant. It was just that during the entrance exam, the dummy had unexpectedly broken and he'd gotten a perfect score, so he'd found it suspicious. The examiner decided to test the barrier, which Kai didn't like, so he approached Lucas, saying, they're going to investigate just because a martial arts student got a perfect score. What nonsense. MC said they could do whatever they wanted. He had nothing to be ashamed of. 10 minutes passed. The animals woke up and saw a bright light in the sky, signifying the barrier's opening. The owl thought it was seeing the outside world, and the strong people from earlier were no longer there. It immediately took off and started running along with the other animals, but the teacher quickly stopped them and chained them. Another examiner noted that they were usually so excited, but not now. The man said the animals weren't so weakened that they could change spaces, and his colleague asked if he was sure this student had gotten a perfect grade. Honestly, the man looked down. He wasn't sure, but he thought something had happened to the animals. His colleague suggested he send them for inspection and continue the tournament. The inspection found no violations, so the next participant went on. Lucas thought they hadn't found any problems, but they still didn't trust him. It was interesting, but the real surprises would come now. Teishi spoke with her teacher and ran into the space, thinking she couldn't lose to Lucas. She aimed at the wolf, dealt a few blows, and thought if she doesn't finish it in 30 seconds, she'll change her target. She decided to stick to this plan, and the wolf, horrified, wondered, does she have the same skin as that monster? Is this his companion? Is he still around? Teishi was about to strike again, but suddenly the wolf crouched and pressed its ears back, showing submission. Seeing the smoke emanating from the beast, she immediately stopped and wondered in surprise. Did a level 3 dark wolf give in so easily? Was it just a coincidence? Or maybe the martial arts department isn't so weak after all? This thought gave her confidence and pounced on other monsters, gradually earning herself points. All the students in the department were very happy, and her points continued to rise rapidly. She defeated another beast, knocking out its fang, and earned a perfect score. The students were overjoyed and delighted. She even finished faster than Lucas. She emerged from the barrier, and the examiner exclaimed, are the beasts really that bad again? Let them send them for inspection this time too. Meanwhile, Teishi headed to her class with a confident smile and thought, just like Lucas said, the beasts weren't as scary as she thought. Martial artists were no weaker than mages. It was time for the next participant. Sharp easily defeated the monsters, earning 10 points, and then Collins went on, also earning a perfect score, as did Kai. In the end, all the martial arts students rose to the top of the rankings, showing perfect results. Shigart grinned, drank some wine, and left the arena. Meanwhile, the beasts were being inspected, but nothing strange was found. The director himself came to check what was going on and asked, Then why were the martial arts students' results so unexpectedly high? The examiner assumed the beasts were frightened by the magic students who had competed before. They hold these competitions every year, but this had never happened before. This was the first competition since the International Relations Department was formed. Probably, close combat with the martial arts students had scared them even more. Otani was also there and simply listened silently. The director said that starting next year, the martial arts department would compete first. This time, the results would remain as they were. Greg was, of course, indignant. If they did that, the martial arts department would move the magic classes from first place and would be level with the elite class. Shigart sighed in irritation, and the director noted that he was right. But is there anything wrong with that? Greg looked down and told him that it was not. But the martial arts department won not because of their ability, but because of luck, so he has doubts. Otani said that luck is also a part of ability. Since it is not the students' fault, they cannot annul their results. The principal agreed with him and asked the examiners to announce the results. The teachers dispersed. Greg clenched his teeth in anger and glanced at Shigart's back, vowing he would pay for this. He left, and the principal and Otani were left alone. The old man said this was a serious problem, affecting the very existence of the martial arts department. As a level 9 martial artist, he knew the real reason, didn't he? Otani replied that he couldn't give him the details, but he could assure him it wasn't bad for their academy. As he wanted, he didn't reveal his secret. Meanwhile, the guys returned to the dorm. Kai was overjoyed. He couldn't believe he had a perfect score. He would tell his father immediately. But taming a magical beast wasn't as difficult as everyone said. Collins suggested that it was because they had become stronger since the entrance exam, and MC added, it was all thanks to Shigart's special training. He was glad no one suspected him. After which they went into the room and Kai asked what they would spend the 20 points they received for winning on. Sharp told him he would save them, and that he would still have to treat him to food. Collins became agitated and said he thought Sharp meant he was saving it for a rainy day. Kai didn't like his answer. The only way out was to buy high-level materials to prepare for close combat training next month. Lucas didn't understand what he meant. He was talking about Aaron Tower. It's called the unique testing ground of the Aaron Magic Academy. Inside it is an imaginary world filled with different creatures, magical beasts, beastmen, giants. Since they are imaginary, they can't die, but they can learn to fight different types of creatures. He heard you can get excellent close combat experience there. Sharp asked, but only 100 students can enter, right? All 12 of the elite class are definitely going, but will they definitely make it into the remaining 88? Kai hugged Lucas and answered him with a grin. He heard that usually the participants are chosen based on their ranking in the training competitions. They got perfect scores, so they will definitely be chosen. The two immediately jumped up from their seats and ran to the store to buy training equipment. MC thought, as expected, all martial artists want to get stronger. Letting everyone get a perfect score in the competition was the right decision. Kai called out to him and invited him to the store too, but he declined. He showed him the Fang pendant and said that he wanted to take a closer look at the one Shigart gave him. Kai asked, is this the same pendant that only the top 3 places in the competition get, right? If only he had gone a little earlier, it would have been his. Lucas hid the pendant with a smile and said that one of his main virtues is good luck. Kai sighed heavily and decided to join Collins and Sharp. Soon, everyone was shown the students who received perfect grades, and it was the entire martial arts department, which shocked everyone. Greg's student Lila angrily kicked the column and said that their class should have been the best after the elite class for the 3rd year in a row. Do they even realize how long her father had been preparing her for this moment? A blade flew past her and pierced the screen. It was the work of her classmate Break, he added irritably. Besides that, they also stole 20 spots for the Aaron Tower. These spots belonged to them, the mages. The guy said that the teachers tested the magical beasts and said they didn't cheat. He returned the blade to himself and said that he heard that the martial arts students bribed those teachers. They started discussing it. That guy, the son of the Terroy family, could easily have slipped them a bribe. Another student named Andre said he recently saw 2 lackeys of the Terroy family. They bought the last training equipment from the academy store. Don't they think that once the martial arts department gets its 20-point bonus, they'll take all the valuable materials? Lila wasn't going to tolerate this and said with a smirk that their meridians were quite fragile. Isn't it time they adjusted their path to success? Soon after, they attacked Sharp and Collins. Sharp was seriously injured and his blade was also laced with poison. Collins became very nervous, realizing he needed to be treated immediately, and offered them his points to back off. But Leela and Andre struck them with magic. Vines piercing Collins's shoulder and knocking him to the ground, and ice piercing Sharp's knee. Lila grumbled about their loudness, but she didn't need their points. Sharp asked why they had attacked back then, and she approached him, saying her demands were simple. Let them just crawl like that to the martial arts department and tell their entire class that their lives were worth less than those of insects. She uncorked a vial of potion and poured it on them, and then screams were heard. Night fell, as the two had not returned. Lucas and Kai went looking for them. Kai wasn't particularly worried, and told his friend there's nothing wrong with him coming back a little later. Why was he so worried? He replied that today was different. For the first time, he caught such a strong scent of blood from this road. The smell of iron hit him in the nose, and he immediately ran there, and Kai lazily followed him. But when he saw the reason for his concern, a shudder ran through his body. Sharp and Collins lay unconscious on the ground, and there was a lot of blood around. Kai clenched his teeth in rage, and MC helped Collins sit up and extended a trembling hand to him, saying that girl from Greg's Kalila had severed his meridians. He lost consciousness, and Lucas's face darkened. He was ready to tear to pieces whoever did it. Kai worriedly called out to Collins. MC said that he was still alive, just unconscious. He would stop the bleeding, and he should get the potion. Kai immediately ran to the faculty, and Lucas checked their condition. All their bones were broken. They must be cursed. This was definitely a bone-breaking technique used by black market assassins. How could they injure them with such a brutal technique? This was definitely an attempted murder. Sharp called out for his parents in his sleep, saying that he was in so much pain. MC's look immediately changed. He promised to avenge them. Kai brought Taishi here, whom he'd bumped into on the way back. She ran up to them excitedly, asking what was going on. Were they attacked? Lucas confirmed it. Their lives were safe, but they needed at least a couple of days' rest. Kai cursed, and he handed him a bag of herbs and said he'd never forgive them. Taishi was furious and declared she'd go to the student council tomorrow, but Kai didn't see the point. Even the teachers were pretending not to notice. The student council wouldn't listen to them. MC hissed through gritted teeth that none of it mattered, and Taishi was surprised by his expression. It was like he was a completely different person. So different from the usually gentle Lucas. He furiously declared he'd definitely get revenge, and the next morning they went to the student council. Theo smiled and asked, "So, they want to duel a student from Professor Greg's class?" MC confirmed it. And if they win, they will demand that the students from the class that attacked them apologize, and if they lose, they will give their S-rank bonus to Professor Greg's class. He asked, but they don't have proof of the student's guilt, right? And what is this S-rank bonus they are talking about? He carelessly threw it on the table, and when it fell, he laughed and said that it slipped from his hand. If they are going to put on such a show, don't they think that betting such a cheap thing is too much? Kai looked in anger at the Fang lying at their feet. He wanted to say a few words to Theo, but Lucas stopped him and asked, then what would be an appropriate bet? Theo thought about it and answered him that it should be something unique. An idea occurred to him and he asked, how about this bet? The losing side will forever give up the right to enter Aran Tower. They were outraged, but MC immediately agreed. The duel was scheduled for 2 days later, and it attracted the attention of the entire academy. The first years, who were unhappy with the martial arts department winning so many spots in Aran Tower, supported Professor Greg's class. The teacher himself even awarded the 3 who attacked Sharp and Collins. Shigart said nothing, and simply increased the intensity of their close combat training. And then, the day of the duel arrived. Kai entered the arena against Andre, and the others stood nearby and watched. Lila, smirking, asked if they should just apologize loudly. Perhaps she would even forgive them. Lucas replied that they didn't yet know how things would turn out. After which the referee told both sides to prepare for the duel. They both drew their weapons, and when the signal sounded, Kai immediately rushed into battle, and his opponent responded by casting ice storm spells. Kai easily shattered all the ice chunks, surprising Andre, who asked, is that all he can do? Andre silently adjusted his glasses and grinned. He was putting on such a brave face, not even realizing he was trapped. He felt cold beneath his feet. Ice had covered his legs, making him unable to move. The mage grinned and said there was no escape. He called him a brat of nobility as he said goodbye and created more ice. Kai grew nervous, and the ice fell on him in one fell swoop, inflicting wounds. The boy grinned and asked, did he finally understand? This is what happens when you provoke a mage. Most of Kai's body was covered in ice. Shivering from the cold, he called out to him, and Andre approached him, asking him to speak up if he was giving up. Lila laughed and said, a loser is still a loser after all. If they admit defeat now, maybe she'll spare them. MC glared at her, making her scared, and asked how long she'd keep yapping. Meanwhile, Kai smirked as he took out some lava jelly and asked if his ice magic could freeze the lava in the magical beast mountains. Lila got worried and told Andre to run, and then there was an explosion. Andre walked away and thought it was the lava jelly. Doesn't he care about his life at all? Blowing it up here? Hiding in a veil of smoke? Kai snuck up on him from behind, and he immediately turned around, but he managed to land a blow on him. He gritted his teeth in pain, stepped back, and the students exclaimed in surprise. A martial artist injured a mage. This guy's leg is completely burned. He blew his leg up just to escape the ice prison. That's some determination. Meanwhile, Kai smiled through his tears, just like Lucas said. The moment he cast the spell, confident of his victory, weaknesses appeared in his defense. Andre didn't expect to be wounded by the martial artist at all. He pointed his staff at him and said that both his legs were burned, and he wouldn't be able to repel his attacks. Now let him die quietly. He took out the lava jelly again and tossed it. Then, with a smirk, he jumped at him, causing an explosion. Andre, in a panic, shot ice at him, calling him crazy. Kai, completely oblivious to his freezing limbs, said, "This is why he hates ice mages. They never follow through." The guy ordered him to get away from him, and then Kai slammed his head into his, breaking his glasses. Blood spurted from his nose and mouth, and after such a blow, he was thrown to the very edge of the arena. He was amazed that he had shattered his ice shield with just brute force. He couldn't lose to a martial artist. Kai was announced as the winner. He happily raised his hand, then returned to Lucas and, taking a healing potion, asked, "That was great, right?" For some reason, he was on top today. MC thought, of course he was on top. He had slipped a strength-boosting potion into his breakfast. Teishi was next. Kai asked if he thought she would be okay. Lucas had no doubt about it. She entered the arena and warmed up while the students discussed the result of the previous fight. Everyone thought that he was just giving in to him because he was from Teroi. Teishi glanced at them and thought, why doesn't anyone want to admit that he just won fair and square? Suddenly, buds flew at her. She quickly reacted and dodged. The buds flew into the wall behind her, and she thought, a surprise attack? If she had been hit, she would have been torn to pieces. Lila said that martial artists care deeply about principles, but for mages, the most important thing is the result. She sent vines at her, and she easily cut them and closed in on her in a second, which she clearly didn't expect. She hit her in the face with her palm, and she thought, how can she be so fast? She was only at level 1. She was about to strike, but Teishi intercepted her hand and said, the motto of martial arts is that the teachings say to value human life. Lila became nervous and used magic, but before she could do anything, Teishi dealt her several quick blows, repelling her magical streams. She finished. Kai was surprised, and MC thought this was expected from the perceptive Teishi. She left the arena, saying that they shouldn't hurt the pride of martial artists, and Lila fell, releasing the poisonous needles she had hidden from her hand. Seeing this, one of the students was very surprised, and Mina asked Theo why he allowed her to use something so dangerous. He responded that she's exaggerating. Nothing happened. Cheers rang out in the arena. No wonder teacher Shigart appointed her class representative. She taught them a lesson for insulting the martial arts department. Greg nervously clenched his teeth. He glanced at Break and thought that they should have taken their places in Aaron Tower, put them in their place, but instead they just disgraced themselves. He glanced at Lucas entering the arena and thought that there was still a chance if he used this technique again. The boys prepared for battle. As soon as the referee announced the start of the match, the guy disappeared from his place and MC began to closely watch his every move. He circled around him, wielding a blade. Some mages like him also studied close combat techniques. He'll be helpless against high-speed techniques. Teishi started to worry. He wasn't attacking, but staying at a distance and focusing on defense. What was he doing? What would Lucas do? He thought at that moment that he didn't need to show off his skills anymore, but at least he needed to teach the enemy a lesson. He rushed to attack. Break was scared, not understanding how he was able to catch him at such speed, and then he struck, but it missed. The guy looked at his fist in surprise and thought, did it miss? He immediately jumped back and threw a dagger at him, which flew past, and thought, is he going crazy? This guy, this intimidating aura emanating from him. He smiled nervously and swung his staff, causing the dagger to fly back and wound Lucas. He froze in place, and the mage, already confident of his victory, pounced on him, shouting that no one can withstand his bone-breaking technique. He struck him, but noticed something strange. MC immediately swung his fist, telling him not to think he'll win without a scratch. The mage was surprised that his technique didn't work, while Kai was already starting to worry about his friend, thinking he couldn't handle him. The mage jumped behind him and said he was curious what trick he'd pull, but it was just a bluff. He pointed the dagger at his face, deciding to end the fight, but Lucas decided to stop giving in and grabbed his arm, saying, now it's his turn. He stomped his foot, creating a powerful shockwave, which terrified the guy and wondered how a first-level martial artist could do that. Dust rose up at the same time, and MC said that now he didn't have to worry about anyone watching them. Is he ready? The guy panicked and summoned his magic dagger, but didn't have time to do anything, as Lucas grabbed his hand and pinned him to the floor. Part of the dagger pierced his palm. He cried out loudly in pain, and he asked, does this sound familiar? How does he feel about the very weapon with which he stabbed Collins with his own hands? He kicked him with all his might, sending him flying to the other side of the arena, and even knocked out a tooth. He caught up with him and clenched his fist, and the guy realized that he couldn't use magic. Did that attack damage his magical meridians? Greg jumped up from his seat in worry, and when MC was about to strike, the magician loudly asked him to stop. He would admit defeat. Lucas's face darkened, clearly determined to see it through. Greg was outraged by his student's words and exclaimed, what is he talking about? With his abilities, he should have won easily. Shigart wondered if he didn't understand how injured his student was, but it would be a problem for them too. MC returned to his friends. They were overjoyed at his victory, Now they'd taught those mages who looked down on him a lesson. The other students were filled with confidence that they could even defeat mages in a duel. And then, Teishi noticed something. She warned Lucas of the danger. The guy attacked him from behind and intended to stab him in the neck with a dagger, but he quickly disappeared and appeared behind him, saying that he had finally shown up. He grabbed him by the neck and pressed on specific points, and the guy felt something breaking inside. Unable to bear the pain, he fell unconscious, and MC asked, when he used his bone-breaking technique, did it ever occur to him that someone could do the same to him? The referee exclaimed. Student Break suddenly attacked after admitting defeat, but Student Lucas perfectly parried the attack. This match ended in a complete victory for Student Lucas from the martial arts department. Iva, meanwhile, was shocked by what she saw. This technique looked exactly like Meridian Severance, an advanced technique from old books. Not a single martial artist in the Empire had been able to master this technique for 100 years. Who is he? On the way to the department, everyone was excitedly discussing today's duel and praising the three of them. The girl declared that from now on, if a mage looked down on her, she would challenge him to a duel. Teishi smiled awkwardly, saying that for some reason today, she felt stronger than usual. While happily discussing everything, the girl bumped into the teacher. He gave them a displeased look and said they were getting too relaxed, but he wasn't saying anything arrogant. The girl smiled awkwardly, saying that they also won the beast-taming competition, to which he replied that they had already figured that out. The only reason the martial arts department won was the stress of the magical beasts, which were attacked for a long time. In other words, they were just lucky. They countered that they definitely won that duel on their own, but he had an answer for that too. Only those three won, not the entire department. Do they plan to spend the rest of their lives relying on the powers that be? Even if they were almost killed for no reason, like Collins and Sharp, are they willing to leave not only their revenge, but also their lives to other people? If they truly think that this is a good life, then they will never become stronger. They should leave the martial arts department right now. He left. His words hurt them to tears. The girl got angry and said that she would become stronger and prove him wrong. MC agreed with the teacher. As a martial artist, he should be confident, but not arrogant. If they don't train, they will never get better. Meanwhile, Shigart bumped into Linda and she said that he was starting to talk just like a real teacher. He replied that he just didn't want them to end up like him. So what does she want from him? She handed him a letter and said that the magical meridians are arranged like a web. It looked like a strange meridian destruction technique. Right now, that guy was lying in the infirmary and suffering from pain. That same evening, Brake's father arrived at the academy. He slammed his palm on the table in a rage and began voicing his grievances to the principal. How did a regular duel between students turn into this? His son's magical meridians were broken. He would never be able to use magic again. The culprit must be severely punished. They must take responsibility and disband the martial arts department. Shigart entered the office, outraged by his words, smashed a bottle of alcohol, and said that he too advocated for a severe punishment for the culprit. The magic used in the duel perfectly matched that used on Sharp and Collins. It was obvious that these three were the ones who inflicted serious injuries on his students. He demanded that the principal strictly punish Greg and his students in accordance with school rules. Greg nervously clenched his teeth and thought that they were trying to twist the situation to their advantage even during the duel. But why was he talking about this now? He told him not to change the subject. They were saying that the student who inflicted the injury used forbidden techniques. It has not yet been confirmed that it was a forbidden technique. A move like meridian destruction is not something a first year can handle. Brake's father thought about it. It was true. It's impossible for the Ryan family's incompetent to master such a technique. Greg decided to blame him for this, wagging his index finger and clicking his tongue, saying, but a high-level martial artist would have handled a forbidden technique. But the only high-level martial artist on the parade ground was Teacher Shigart. He smirked, poking him in the chest and asking, was it really him from the very beginning? He replied that if he had decided to use a forbidden technique, he would have used it on him a long time ago. The director noted that he seemed to believe that this incident was not related to forbidden techniques. Then how would he explain his condition? He responded by asking, who knows, maybe he got what he deserved. He recently asked Lucas about this. He swore that he had not used any forbidden techniques and offered his own theory. Apparently, Brake paid exorbitant sums to black market assassins to learn how to hurt people. He's quite well known in certain circles as a troubled aristocrat, so perhaps someone was worried that information from the black market would leak out, and some powerful figure used the duel as cover to begin their operations. The director paused, and the boy's father became indignant, exclaiming, is he trying to deceive them with such ridiculous rumors? Greg pointed out with displeasure that it was just a guess, and Shigart said, that's true, but at least it's more plausible than the theory that a low-level martial artist could use an ancient forbidden technique. In any case, the fact remains, there was someone capable of using forbidden techniques, and if they incurred the wrath of this person carelessly, they could be in serious trouble. Meridian Severance is a terrifying technique that can instantly break even a genius mage. Meanwhile, Otani went to the library and found a book with this technique there. He blew the dust off the book, noticing that it was worn in some places, meaning someone had definitely touched it recently. He opened the book to the page he needed. It described and illustrated how to use the technique in detail. Seeing that the hand position matched the one Lucas had used in the duel, he smirked. Meanwhile, MC went to the hot springs in the Beast Forest with Collins and Sharp to finish their treatment. He poured the potion into the pool, and the water immediately began swirling around them. They felt pain as their bones and muscles began to heal very quickly, but they endured. Lucas thought he knew they were hurt, but there was still a little time left. Martial artists can use healing techniques just like mages. A few days later, the city of Daku. The carriage stopped at the gate. Holt offered Catherine his hand, helping her out, and said they would see the children soon. She looked around and noticed that so much time had passed, but nothing had changed. Her face darkened. Her husband called out to her, and she told him with a smile not to worry. She just remembered something. They came out to greet them. Seeing him, Catherine burst into tears of happiness. It was her younger brother Saiyan, Iva's father. He greeted her with a smile, noting that so many years had passed. 17 years ago, unexpectedly, all the monsters attacked the borders of the Empire simultaneously. People united to fight against the army of monsters. They fought for 3 days and 3 nights, but both sides suffered huge losses. And in this war, the young knight commander Holt Ryan and the mage Catherine Miranda met. And in the face of death, the two vowed to spend the rest of their lives together as one. However, her father, Duke Miranda, was against this marriage. He disowned his daughter, and Catherine severed all ties with her family. Recalling the moment of their farewell, Cyan smiled and said, "Just think, their children first met here, at the Aran Magic Academy. Time flies. Her children are so kind." Their father mentioned that Julia is very similar to her in her youth. Catherine was surprised that he even knew about the existence of grandchildren, and her brother suggested that she go home. Deep down, his father always wanted to meet her. She was simultaneously happy and surprised, asking if everything would be alright, and then her brother sighed and said that he only wanted to see her. Catherine understood. She immediately turned to her husband, and he waved his hand at her, telling her to go home. It was time for him to return to the front. She wanted to object, but he assured her that everything was fine. It's good that she got a chance to visit home, even if only for a short time. He will come to her when the campaign is over. Cyan mentally noted that he swallowed his pride and secretly asked him to facilitate the reunion of his father and sister. He is such a good husband. But his father still hasn't forgiven her for marrying a martial artist, a noblewoman. If someone ever appears who can dispel prejudices, then everything can change. MC sneezed at this time. He thought it was strange. He trained so much and still caught a cold. Now they were in the dining room. Julia nudged him with her elbow, and Kai asked, "Is he buying food for someone?" It was such a rare sight. He told him to leave him alone. When Sharp and Collins recovered, he would make them feed him. MC remarked that it was not a bad idea, and heard people discussing them at another table. The guy told his friend to look at them. "This is the king of the martial arts department." He heard that right before the fight. Break was attacked by an assassin, so he was just lucky. And how can someone be lucky 3 times in a row? Julia heard all this. She immediately approached their table and asked with displeasure, who were they insulting here? She quickly put them on their knees as an apology, and Kai told his friend that he would take the bento with him to the room, so let him eat with his sister today. He apologized to him about this, and then they parted. Taking the food and sitting at the table, Julia began to eat everything with pleasure, and MC noticed a new rose-shaped hairpin in her hair. Did she buy it recently? She smiled and asked, "Does it look beautiful, right?" Iva gave it to her, said that it was a gift from the Miranda family. Lucas thought about them. She was a genius mage, so it was no wonder they were fawning over her. He handed her his plate of food and asked her to get along with Iva, including for their mother's sake. Julia smiled and remembered that she wanted to write her a letter informing her that she had become class representative. Mina heard this and approached her to congratulate her. She was sure that in the future, she would become a pillar of this school. She would also be here to help her at any time. Suddenly, Iva, sitting at a table nearby, quickly walked out of the cafeteria, pushing everyone in her path, and she was clearly annoyed about something. Not long before, Linda, the teacher, had called her in and said her skill level is almost the same as Julia's, especially in mind control magic. But in other respects, Julia is clearly superior, which is why she thinks she is more suitable for the role of class representative. Then she was very upset, and now she ran out of the cafeteria in a rage and decided to prove with her own strength that Julia was just the teacher's favorite. Julia noticed this. She didn't understand the reason for her anger and said, apparently she hasn't been eating well lately. She will buy her lunch on the way back. Mina sat next to her and asked if she was close to her. She answered with a smile that they were roommates. Iva's mind control magic is simply amazing. MC noted that this is indeed a very rare skill, and suddenly Mina surrounded them with a silencing magic barrier so that no one could hear them. She smirked, put her finger to her lips, and quietly said, "She's quiet. Because of this, it is difficult to deal with her. The wind magic she uses is also interesting. If they want, she will tell them about it." But both of them didn't listen to her at all, as they were currently busy exchanging food, and Lucas asked, "She didn't just come here to chat, did she?" The girl smiled, noting in her mind that he was being so cautious around her. But as long as Julia respected her, such a small intervention meant nothing. She noted that he was quite abrupt, so she would speak directly too. She was sure they knew how dangerous the magical beast mountains were. Recently, there had been changes in the ecosystem there. The number of low-level magical beasts had significantly decreased, and the crested leopard cubs that used to be everywhere had completely disappeared. Lucas and Julia smiled awkwardly, remembering how they had ridden all and chased them throughout the forest. The girl also said, 3 days ago, the Imperial investigation team discovered a high-level magical beast. This scared Julia. She took the spoon out of her hands and asked if it was really Ool. MC immediately coughed loudly. She realized that she had almost let slip their secret, and he asked her with a smile, does she want them to go on a mission? What difficulty level? She answered him, 100 points. They were both very surprised, and Lucas said that it would be easy for them. Meanwhile, dinner was held at the Miranda estate. Duke Soa Miranda didn't say a word the entire time. Cyan thought that he had already cleaned his sister's room, but her father still makes her stay in the guest room. How stubborn he was. She didn't even touch the food. The atmosphere here was simply terrible. In this silence, Soa loudly put the cutlery on the table and called out to his daughter, which made her flinch. He decided to acknowledge Julia as his granddaughter, as he saw in her the potential to become a holy mage. She thanked him with an awkward smile, saying that her son, Lucas, had also shown himself to be an excellent martial artist, and even received the highest score. He was not at all interested in hearing about him. Martial artists were useless anyway. What their Miranda family needed was someone with the potential to become a holy mage. Catherine was deeply upset. As she'd expected, his prejudices against martial artists weren't so easily changed. There was a knock at the door, and the butler entered the dining room, handing the Duke a letter stating the investigation team dispatched to the magical Beast Mountains had reported new information. The siblings exchanged glances, wondering why the sudden investigation into the magical Beast Mountains had begun. The letter was brief. A new area beneath the lair had been discovered, the danger level unknown. Cyan jumped to his feet, asking what had happened, and his sister worried that the children at the academy might be in danger. Their father said that the teachers and his subordinates were there now, so the children were in no danger. They should wait until this matter was resolved before visiting the children. After these words, he left, and Catherine lowered her gaze, silently asking her children to wait for her. At this time, Mina led them to fill out the application for the mission, but there she was informed that she needed at least 5 people to take on this mission, and one of them had to be a member of the student council. The girl was very indignant. She exclaimed that there was no limit on the number of participants yesterday. He was confused and said that the president changed the conditions because something happened in the mountain cave. Mina puffed out her cheeks in displeasure. He did this on purpose, hoping that she wouldn't be able to gather 5 people. MC thought, is the vice president of the student council so unsociable that she can't find 5 people? No wonder she became so close to Julia during the entrance exams. After that, Mina approached them with an awkward smile and apologized. It seems they will have to abandon this mission. Lucas said that if she needs more people, she should leave it to them, and Julia agreed. Mina almost shed tears. They are such good children. She feels like she's doing something wrong when she uses them as pawns. But when they assembled the team, she took her words back. Kai, showing off his new armor his parents gave him, told her that since his best friend Lucas was going on a mission, he should help him. Maya peeked out from behind him and shyly greeted her. She's a water-type healer, so she's sure she can help them. Mina didn't want them on the team at all. They were all newbies. They'd just slow them down. MC quietly asked his sister why she'd called Maya instead of Iva, and Julia was upset. It turned out Iva refused to even listen to her. Mina sighed in disappointment and thought, apparently, they're here for numbers, and she and Julia are enough for the mission. She cast magic on them and suggested they hurry up. Otherwise, it would take half a day even with acceleration magic. A few hours later, they reached the beast's lair. An Imperial investigation team flag stood at the entrance. Apparently, they were currently checking the place. Kai immediately recognized it as Miranda's family crest, and Mina saw feathers on the ground and noted signs of a struggle. Lucas and Julia breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this wasn't Ul's lair. Suddenly, he sensed something, looked up, and saw a harpy flying toward him, warning everyone of the attack. Mina immediately used magic, striking one of the harpies with a wind blade, while MC barely moved, dodging their feather blasts. Mina, however, didn't immediately notice, and Kai protected her. He smiled and told her to just leave the melee to them. However, because he was distracted by her, he didn't notice another harpy attacking him, but Lucas quickly came to his aid. They stood back to back, and he told him not to try to act tough. Kai asked in response, could he handle his speed on his own? Maya used a water spirit barrier, protecting their bodies from damage, and more monsters flew at them. Mina smiled. She felt that same feeling when everyone works together. So much time had passed. She turned to Julia and said that this magical beast hates wind and thunder magic. She wanted to offer to attack together, but Julia didn't hear her and used high-level magic and erected a magical barrier. The monsters inside it were immediately struck. Their bodies were pierced by lightning. They fell, and Kai noted with a smile that her thunder magic was, as always, incredible. Mina was shocked, and Julia asked if she had told her something. She answered her that it didn't matter anymore, and realized that she had truly underestimated the abilities of these pawns. After Maya healed everyone, Kai excitedly moved his hand and said that everything healed in a second, like she was a goddess. She thought he was exaggerating, but if Lucas called her that, then that would be a different matter. She blushed at the thought and quickly pulled herself together, wondering what she was even thinking. It was better not to get hurt in the first place. Finally, they entered the cave, Mina walking ahead, lighting the way for everyone. Inside, the cave was large enough for a small army to pass through. MC remarked, the cave didn't look natural. It seemed to have been dug, and logically, it should be teeming with magical beasts. Mina agreed with him. The further they went, the more dangerous it became, so they needed to be on guard. Soon, goblins jumped out of the darkness at them. Julia quickly fried them with lightning, and while they writhed on the floor in pain, Mina carefully examined them and said that they had lived underground for so long that their vision had deteriorated. When they search for prey, they rely only on their hearing. She stunned them with a shockwave, so they were safe. Kai quickly finished them off and said, but if they defeat all the magical beasts that attack them one by one, this will never end. He has a plan. A few minutes later, he brought a huge crowd of all kinds of monsters to them and told the girls to aim at him. They both prepared spells. He became slightly nervous, and their combined magic directed towards the monsters, and a powerful explosion was heard. Lucas, puzzled, noted that it was actually effective. This is a fairly common attack tactic in video games. Could it be that Kai was reincarnated too? The guy waved at them from under a pile of monsters and exclaimed, he lures all the enemies into one place, and they defeat them with one blow. How do they like that? It's a brilliant plan, right? Only he can pull off such a technique because of his high-level equipment. He apologized to Lucas for upstaging him, and he silently told him not to think that everyone was as greedy for attention as he was. Following Kai's plan, their group smoothly neutralized all the magical beasts and gradually approached the center of the nest. The girls were very tired, but Kai was full of energy and ran after another batch of monsters, and MC called out to him, telling him to stop. Julia and the others needed to rest, but he ignored them and soon returned with a bunch of monsters, happily waving at them, but they were nowhere to be found, leaving him confused. They were hiding at the time. Lucas said that he had brought this on himself, but to think that they would have to sacrifice their companion. Julia prayed for him to be happy in the next life, and Maya wiped away her tears. Her magical power was almost zero, but if he still breathed, she would definitely save him. They smiled wryly at how seriously she took it, and suddenly the ceiling began to shake. She worriedly asked if that could be Kai. MC answered her that the sound was coming from the center of the nest. Apparently, the investigation team had reached the monster. They decided to check it out themselves. Lucas immediately smelled a strong scent of blood coming from the center and gave each of them a recovery potion so that they would be ready for battle. Mina thanked him and said that given the skills of the investigation team, they were unlikely to need them, but they still needed to check them, just in case. When they reached the center of the nest, they saw a pile of soldier bodies. The entire investigation team was dead. Mina immediately decided to abandon the mission and leave immediately, when suddenly there was a roar. A monster had broken through the wall, a still-living soldier hanging from one of its horns, and the monster was a huge minotaur. Mina stared at it in horror, not understanding how this was possible. How did a disaster-class monster end up here? MC immediately rushed to her and thought, such a powerful opponent can't appear on a simple school mission. He sensed its aura. He pushed the girl away from the flying axe and took her place, and then there was a roar of impact. Lucas blocked the blow, but for some reason the blade was covered in ice, so he took no damage at all. Julia immediately ran up to them, worried, and Mina asked if she had just conjured that ice. MC said it wasn't her. It was the man on the Minotaur's horns. The monster furiously removed it from its horn, causing him to cry out in pain, and asked if he had interfered. The girls were surprised that he saved them, even though he was so seriously injured. With his last bit of strength, the mage asked them to hurry and request reinforcements from the Imperial army. The ancient seal was broken. The Minotaur squeezed him tighter, breaking everything inside him, and said that he would devour every last one of them. The girls were terrified for him. He threw something on the ground and used magic, telling the monster that he was the one talking nonsense here. His entire body was covered in a thick layer of ice. The mage was also affected and told the children to go and report the situation. They nodded decisively in response. Lucas mentally apologized to him for not being able to save him, but he promised he would return and avenge him. After that, they broke into a run. The man smiled and could finally allow himself to sleep. He had done everything he could. The Minotaur crawled out of the ice and screamed loudly in rage. A pathetic little bug like him dared to attack him? He decided to devour him first, but Julia struck him with lightning, preventing him from doing so. He released the mage from his hands, and Julia shouted that this man was no insect. He was a great warrior. Mina caught him with wind magic and said that they needed to run. He had bought them time. MC told her that he would delay him, so she should report everything to the appropriate authorities. She reminded him that they were talking about a disaster-class monster now. A first-year wouldn't be able to handle it. Lucas understood that it wouldn't be easy, but he had to do something. Suddenly, a huge piece of rock fell next to Mina. Fortunately, she managed to jump out of the way. The Minotaur was very angry, MC told them to leave it to him and go, but Mina wasn't going to do that. She turned to the monster and ordered everyone to step back. As vice president, she was responsible for their safety. MC looked at her in a new way. He thought she only cared about her own plans, but she had enough courage. No one was going to leave her here alone, so the girls joined her, and Maya said she used magic to contact Kai for help. They would fight together. The Minotaur screamed furiously. They released magic, and Mina exclaimed that their teamwork didn't matter. They couldn't handle it anyway. Lucas smiled and told her to have faith in them, then launched a frontal attack, adding that they definitely wouldn't lose to such a beast. The Minotaur swung his enormous axe and brought the blow down with a thunderous crash. Then he slowly turned his heavy gaze to the side. MC concentrated energy in his fist, pushed off the ground sharply, and soared upward, thrusting his energy-charged fist forward. Mina spread her arms to the sides and shouted, "Lucas, he must continue to distract him. She will strike when the opportunity arises." Lucas shouted, "He understands," and lunged forward, drawing the monster's attention to himself. The Minotaur roared, "They are small insects," and extended a clawed hand toward the protagonist. Julia, meanwhile, formed a huge magical symbol above her head, weaving power within it layer by layer. The protagonist glanced at her briefly and said calmly, "It seems they are ready." Julia, without taking her eyes off the symbol, shouted, "He must leave her brother alone," and directed a powerful electric current at the monster. Without wasting a second, MC kicked off and unleashed a series of crushing kicks on the Minotaur. The monster howled in pain. The sound rolled through the cave, echoing dully in his chest. The protagonist frowned and roared. He'd hit a weak spot and blocked their escape. "Make them run now." Julia immediately pointed her staff forward and unleashed several sharp electrical pulses. Mina, meanwhile, concentrated a dense ball of energy in her hand. Both girls simultaneously let out a loud cry and directed streams of energy straight at the monster. The shockwave threw the Minotaur back, knocking a heavy sigh out of it. He gasped, breathing heavily, through clenched teeth. "Damn it, as soon as his leg heals, he'll kill them all." Maya, clenching her fists, firmly declared, "This won't happen." A huge magical symbol flared beneath her feet. She continued pumping it with energy, then sharply shouted, "Take that!" And the water ball rushed towards the monster, striking with the force of a tidal wave. Maya exhaled heavily after the attack. At the same moment, the Minotaur's enormous axe crashed to the ground. Maya cried out in horror. "Is his leg healed already?" The Minotaur snorted contemptuously. A little water is nothing to him, and lunged forward, stretching his claws straight towards Maya, ready to grab her. But Julia, not breaking her concentration, cried out, "What if I shock him while he's soaking wet? He will pay with his life for killing their soldiers." The next moment, bright flashes of electrical energy pierced the monster's drenched carcass, causing it to shudder with each discharge. The protagonist, shielding himself from the flashes with his hand, froze for a moment and thought that Julia had deliberately doused the monster with water to enhance the lightning effect. With a deafening roar, the Minotaur collapsed to the ground. MC looked at the girls and mentally noted that developing such a strategy on the fly was exactly how a model student operates. Gathering energy in his hand, he calmly said, "Now, the final blow." And the next moment, he jumped right onto the chest of the defeated monster. Mina, wiping sweat from her face, exhaled in surprise. "Huh?" At that very second, a wave of mysterious force rolled through the Minotaur's body, a strange, oppressive tension. The protagonist froze for a moment, thinking he felt some mysterious pressure. He brought down a blow on the monster's chest, and his fist slammed right into the magical symbol that suddenly flared. At that very moment, the Minotaur grabbed his hand with an iron grip. Meanwhile, outside the cave, Kai froze, hearing an eerie rumble, like thunder or an earthquake. He turned slightly, peering into the darkness, and thought it sounded like an earthquake and needed to call for reinforcements immediately. With these thoughts in mind, he resolutely rushed forward. At that moment, the monster roared loudly, rising to its feet. A magical symbol on its chest flared, pulsing with dark energy. The protagonist gritted his teeth, trying to protect himself from the powerful streams of energy. He jumped sharply to the side, skidding to a stop on the rocky ground, then raised his hand to his ear. Blood remained on his fingers. He thought that it wasn't even the blows that had injured him, but the sound waves from the monster's voice itself, and noted to himself, the monster's strength had noticeably increased. He glanced back and mentally asked, "Is everything all right?" At that very moment, Mina, with the last of her strength, held the magic circle of silence, but the barrier around the girls became covered in a network of cracks. It barely contained the onslaught of monstrous power. The next second, the girl collapsed to the ground, dropping her wand from her weakened fingers. Two other girls lay motionless nearby. They had already lost consciousness. Seeing this, the protagonist instantly concentrated energy in his fist. The Minotaur stepped toward him, and the next second, the protagonist pushed off the floor, threw his fist forward, and lunged. Their fists collided with a deafening blow. The protagonist frowned and cried out, "He will not leave him alive," and immediately delivered a crushing blow, tearing off the monster's limb. Without giving his opponent time to recover, he swung and struck again, severing several fingers on his clawed paw. The Minotaur immediately swung back, aiming for the protagonist. He somersaulted in the air, landed softly a few steps away, and thought, "What kind of monster is this? It seems it feels no pain at all." He stared ahead and noticed with alarm how the monster's severed body parts began to rapidly regenerate. The The thought flashed through his mind. Is his arm already regenerating? The monster raised its hand again and brought down a blow in front of itself. MC jumped aside just in time. He coughed, wiped blood from the corner of his mouth, and thought, even coughing up blood is a sign of serious damage from the sheer pressure of his power. It seemed he had underestimated how dangerous this monster was. The Minotaur rumbled dully. Not bad. His blood stirs his heart. With these words, he brought down a heavy blow on the ground. The protagonist darted to the side, running along the wall, dodging the debris. Then the Minotaur swung his axe and struck the floor. The stone cracked, scattering into shards in all directions. Stones rained down from the ceiling. MC thought, the falling stones are falling right on the others. He rushed forward, dodging the falling boulders, and rushed towards the unconscious girls. Noticing that a large shard was about to fall on Julia, he rushed towards it and pushed the stone aside with a powerful blow. Only then was he able to breathe a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, the Minotaur concentrated streams of terrifying energy around itself, sending waves of energy outward. Then the monster opened its mouth and let out a deafening roar. The sound waves scattered throughout the cave, bouncing off the walls and amplifying the echo. The protagonist gathered the energy in his palms, held it out in front of him, and thought, the power of his roar is amplified by the echo bouncing off the stone walls. Something must be done. The next moment, the Minotaur leaped toward him and, raising its axe, brought down a blow in front of itself, shouting, Die! The Minotaur roared again, and the protagonist, barely catching the movement, managed to raise an aura defense. The Minotaur said, Aura defense. Not a bad move. But enough of this futile resistance. He and these girls will die here anyway. The protagonist concentrated his energy in his palms again, and swung it forward. A powerful stream of magic rushed toward the Minotaur. The next moment, he grabbed the blade of a huge axe, never taking his eyes off the monster, and quietly said, he will say this when he defeats it. Then he grabbed the handle, slid lightning fast behind the monster, and swung. Frowning, he added, as long as he lived, he would not allow it to lay a finger on Julia and the others. He threw the axe, immediately lunged forward, grabbed the Minotaur, and brought it down with another crushing blow, slicing through its thick hide. The Minotaur howled in rage. The protagonist immediately followed up with a sharp kick. His eyes glowed with energy, and waves of aura spread in all directions, shattering small stones around him. But the next moment, the monster grabbed him by the leg and threw him forcefully to the ground. The protagonist was thrown aside, landing heavily on a rock and screaming, noticing the Minotaur's arm being torn off. MC froze for a moment, staring at the severed limb, which was still trembling. The monster's skin was covered in bulging veins, and its eyes flashed with scarlet fire. The Minotaur raised its clawed paw, opened its toothy maw, and roared again. The protagonist pushed off the rock and in one leap fell upon the monster. Their fists clashed again, sending pulses of energy flying in all directions from the impact. The monster roared, Good! Now that's a true martial artist. Come on! The protagonist held his breath for a second. The monster's eyes, like dark mirrors, reflected the protagonist himself, focused, clutching a clot of dense dark energy. The monster hissed, now he will kill him. At that very moment, MC gathered all his strength into a single blow and unleashed it on his opponent. A few moments later, Julia's entire body shuddered and she let out a hoarse breath. What? She propped herself up on her elbows looking around. Beside her, Maya, her eyes barely open, quietly asked, Are they alive? Julia's gaze darted around, searching for her brother. Meanwhile, the protagonist continued to land blow after blow on the Minotaur's body. Dark bodily fluid sprayed out, settling on the rocks and mixing with the dust. Julia, noticing the protagonist's transformation, trembled with anxiety and quietly called out, Brother! She stared in horror at the streams of ominous energy swirling around him and at his eyes, shrouded in a crimson haze. Lucas's entire body gradually turned a dark shade, and a mysterious symbol clearly appeared on his back. Meanwhile, in the fiery kingdom, several statues bound in heavy chains stood frozen in molten lava. The next second, a hand suddenly rose from the seething magma, followed by the demonic Lord of Wrath, Valsava, bursting forth from the flames. He roared, He has returned to this defiled world, this so-called god of war. He will tear off every limb. Ursita sat chained nearby and snorted softly. Oh, how naive. Valsava, standing thoughtfully to the side, quietly asked, Does this guy really have enough potential? Ursita only smirked in response, and pointing to a glowing pattern that had appeared right on the floor, said, Look here, even in this state, he managed to break free from his control. That meant something. In the cave, Lucas continued to strike blow after blow, shouting, He will kill him. His body was becoming more and more saturated with dark energy with each passing second. Julia, unable to bear it any longer, rushed towards him and tightly grabbed his torso, shouting, Brother, stop! Please wake up. Maya, gathering a steady stream of energy in her palms, directed it towards Lucas and firmly said, Let him calm down. The next moment, Julia watched in horror as Lucas's fist rose up for a crushing blow. Maya screamed, Lucas is about to strike. Julia, go away. Lucas froze for a split second, preparing to unleash all his pent-up power. Julia, bursting into tears, cried out again, Brother. Tears rolled down her cheeks, falling down. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Lucas barely had time to think. It's Julia. And at that very moment, a powerful explosion thundered. When the dust settled, Julia quietly whispered, Brother. The dark shade on Lucas's body slowly began to fade. Alarmed, she extended her hand forward and called out, Hey! He looked at her with with a clear, recognizing gaze and quietly said, "I'm sorry. He's in his right mind now. She needs to move away for a bit, okay?" She whispered back, "Okay." Lucas took a deep breath and a new wave of power rolled through his body. But this time it wasn't dark. His eyes flashed with pure light, and the energy seething within him stretched upward, as if reaching for the sky. The mark on his back began to dissolve, losing its outline. Maya called his name. Julia came closer and asked in a trembling voice, "Brother, is he okay?" He calmly answered, "He's fine." Then she rushed to him again, and hugging him, whispered through tears, "He scared her so much." Lucas lightly patted her on the back and quietly said, "I'm sorry." He wouldn't let this get the better of him again. Meanwhile, a voice pierced the fiery realm. "Lucas! Hey Lucas! They're coming to help!" Forsyta slowly descended closer to the demonic Lord of Wrath and calmly said, "There's no need to rush. This key still has a few tests to pass." She lifted the corner of her lips slightly and added, glancing at the happy, unsuspecting Julia, for example, losing what was most precious to him. After some time, the protagonist heard a voice through the fog in his mind. "Wake up." He opened his eyes with an effort and was momentarily confused. His thoughts flashed. Who is this? Father and mother and Julia, his sister. Unable to hold back her tears, exclaimed joyfully. He opened his eyes. Thank God. She hastily wiped her cheeks, wiping away the moisture. Lucas quietly asked, "Where is he?" The next moment, dark energy stirred in his body again. He sharply threw his fist forward. Immediately, he covered his face with his palm and exhaled in stunned silence. What? He stared at his own trembling hand and thought that his body was moving on its own, as if it belonged to someone else. Images flashed through his head again. Father, mother, Julia. Soon he heard an alarmed cry. "Hey, Lucas, what's he doing?" A bandaged Lucas sat on the couch, his fist still raised in front of him. He was in the infirmary of the Aran Academy of Magic. Turning his head slightly, he looked in surprise at Kai, who was wincing in pain, pressing his palm to his bruised nose. Kai gritted his teeth. He would have punched him if he hadn't been the one injured. Lucas quickly muttered an apology. Kai, casting him a quick glance, headed for the exit, muttering quietly, "Damn." Left alone, Lucas sank into thought. He tried to understand why he had such a dream. He thought, this strange force, the same one he fought in the cave, made itself known? He remembered being unable to think clearly, just like that time the dead bandit had turned into a monster. Only then had he retained consciousness. But this time, he had completely lost control, while Julia and Maya were trying to wake him. His consciousness must have been consumed by this power during the battle with the Minotaur. He remembered almost nothing except the rage that consumed him. The thought froze. Rage. Maybe that was what consumed his mind? But was it even possible to suppress anger during a fight? Lucas folded his arms and considered asking someone to stay with him during the battles, so they could stop him if he lost control again. He chuckled softly, but then his whole body shuddered. The thought flashed through his mind. The only people he could go on missions with were the local students, but asking them to restrain him in a berserk state was extremely dangerous. The next moment, he shook his head decisively. Then he had to learn to stop himself. Meanwhile, in the infirmary corridor, the workers were quietly chatting. This patient is already fine, but she's a high school student. How did she get such serious injuries on just a school mission? Shigart just happened to be passing by. He took a sip of his drink and glanced briefly at the slightly open door of the ward. The second worker shrugged. They said she was protecting the younger students. She took 2 students from the martial arts department with her. No wonder she was injured. Shigart turned his gaze to Mina, lying motionless in the hospital bed. At that very second, powerful streams of energy erupted from the neighboring ward. Shigart frowned. A high-level aura. Could that really be a martial arts master? The workers covered their faces with their hands in fear, and one of them muttered, "The windows were closed. Where did such a strong wind come from?" Then they noticed an empty bottle lying on the floor in the hallway and exchanged glances. Meanwhile, Lucas, in his room, was concentrating his energy in front of him. He sighed with relief and quietly said, "Excellent." He glanced at the clones that had appeared before him and thought, the cloning technique had been successful. Approaching one of them, he studied its outline thoughtfully. He began to reason. According to old books in the library, a clone's power is, at best, half that of the main body. With 3 clones, the energy is distributed evenly, meaning each one's power is roughly 1/6 of his own. This is clearly not enough to stop him in his berserk state. He waved his hand, dispersing the clones, and thought, but at least they can buy themselves a little time to escape. Footsteps were heard in the hallway. Lucas looked up and saw Shigart, who, hands in his pockets, was leisurely walking forward. The teacher stopped in front of the room and said calmly, "Starting with the entrance exams, then the magical beast training competition, and now this mission." He was constantly surrounded by oddities. He tilted his head slightly and asked bluntly, "Who is he? Why did he come to this school?" The protagonist smiled awkwardly and said, "He doesn't understand what he's talking about. His goal in entering the Aran Magic Academy was to master the art of wielding weapons and become stronger." The next second, Shigart silently appeared behind him and swung a blow. Lucas reacted instantly and blocked the attack with his forearm. The teacher tilted his head slightly and asked, "Did he say to become stronger? In that case, let him show his true abilities." Lucas frowned. True abilities? What did he mean? He thought for a moment. Mr. Shigart was smart, as expected. If he could earn the respect of such a person, his school life would be much easier. Before he could finish his thought, Catherine entered the room. She paused at the threshold and said politely, "She apologizes. And who is he?" Shigart cursed silently. He completely forgot. Today is a holiday, so the guards allow everyone into the school. Lucas quickly stepped forward. "Mother," Catherine asked, "can he leave her son's side?" Julia, standing behind, muttered thoughtfully, "This." The protagonist came closer and explained, "This is Master Shigart, his form teacher from the martial arts department. He was just checking how he was feeling. He taught him the importance of choosing carefully who to engage in a fight with." Shigart glanced at Lucas and thought, "This boy, is this a hint in his direction?" It seemed he noticed his mother approaching long before she appeared in the doorway. Catherine smiled softly and asked, "Is that true? Since today is a holiday, wouldn't it be better to rest?" She turned her gaze to the teacher and added, "So doesn't that seem reasonable, Mr. Shigart?" He sighed quietly and noted mentally. In other words, she was politely asking him to leave. However, as long as he remained this boy's homeroom teacher, he still wouldn't let him cause trouble. Then he said, "In that case, he apologizes for disturbing you." She politely replied, "Goodbye, sir." When the door closed behind the teacher, she put the chest nearby and said with a slight reproach, "God, you can't anger your teacher like that, you know?" Lucas quietly agreed. "Yes." Catherine sat on the edge of the bed and quietly continued. Since they both risked their lives in that cave, she remained in Miranda's estate until the very end. She wanted to meet them as soon as possible, but circumstances did not allow it. Julia, sitting next to her brother, suddenly raised her head. "Huh? She was there all this time?" She looked at her mother with tear-filled eyes and quietly whispered, "She so wanted to see her sooner, mother." Catherine smiled awkwardly and, bowing her head slightly, told her son to do something about it. Lucas quietly said, "She shouldn't look at him like that." Then he paused a little and asked, "Is father not with her?" Catherine lowered her gaze and quietly answered, "It seems the situation at the front is far from ideal. He left for the front right after bringing her to the Miranda estate." Julia hugged her mother closer, and Lucas thought, the Miranda family accepted mother, but it seems they still don't acknowledge father. How stubborn this family of mages is. Catherine placed her hand on the chest and said, "She has a gift from father here, to celebrate his first place in the offensive exam." Lucas's eyes widened in surprise. His gaze slid over the chest, and he let out a soft breath. "This," she explained. "This is a precious sword, an heirloom passed down through generations in the Ryan family. It was damaged during a battle with the Beastman army several decades ago. It is extremely difficult to repair, so it is practically useless in battle, but it is still a family heirloom. Father places great hopes on it." The next moment, Lucas carefully took the weapon in his hands and quietly said, "He will try not to let his father down." Julia barely audibly whispered, "Her brother is so lucky." Catherine turned a soft gaze on her and sighed thoughtfully. Julia exclaimed, "Why are they both laughing?" Lucas pulled her closer and, affectionately ruffling her hair, said, "After all, she's mother's favorite." Catherine held out a small handful of pills and said, "She has a gift for her too. Let her take these medicines. She baked it with sugar especially for her." Julia beamed with delight, jumped up and down happily and exclaimed, "Yes, she loves it, mommy," and immediately began to taste the treat. Catherine asked, "She will give this to Jeremiah later, okay?" Julia froze for a moment. "What is it?" Catherine was holding a small box in her hands and explained, "Dad prepared animal medicine for Jeremiah too, but since Jessica had not come this time, she took this with her." Julia sighed quietly, carefully took the box and said, "Okay." She does not really like Jeremiah, but she will definitely give it to him. Catherine smiled tenderly and quietly asked, "Be a good girl." Julia only nodded in response, clutching the box to herself. Sometime later in the men's dormitory, one of the students called out, "Jeremiah, he has a visitor." Soon Jeremiah came out into the street and stopped right in front of Julia. Everyone around him immediately started whispering, "Isn't that Julia? The one who won first place in the special class? What does she want? I thought he said Julia was his little sister, right? Really? Cool. His sister is a real genius." One of the guys clapped Jeremiah on the shoulder and cheerfully suggested, "Let him take Julia with him on the next mission." But at that very second, Jeremiah abruptly shook off the stranger's hand and threw a thorny vine aside. Everyone around froze for a moment, and the guy muttered in shock, "What's wrong with him?" Jeremiah silently walked forward, concentrating dense, heavy energy in his body. He thought, his father and mother didn't even come to visit him. He clutched the box tighter with trembling fingers and thought, they gave the family heirloom to Lucas just because he won first place on the exam? He's just trash. Why does everyone adore him? Gritting his teeth, he muttered through them, "He'll take everything he has." Sometime later, Lucas and Julia saw their mother off. Time flew by, and Catherine returned to the Miranda estate. She did mention, however, that she'd be staying in Daku for a while, and even though they couldn't see each other every day, just knowing their mother was nearby made the siblings a little happier. Mina, who had been seriously injured, received a new elixir. It was made especially for her. Since the cure was presented as a gift from the Miranda family, no one suspected a trick, although the potion proved surprisingly effective. That same day, Mina, examining the barely visible glow on her hand, quietly said, "So that's what a noble potion is like. Amazing." Half a month passed. A group of students gathered in front of the Aaron Tower. Sharp exhaled enthusiastically. "Wow," Collins exclaimed, not hiding his delight. "So this is it, the Aaron Tower." Kai, narrowing his eyes, nodded thoughtfully. worthy of being called the school's symbol. Shines just like him. Lucas, turning to his friends, snorted. Come on, it's not that high. Don't pretend you didn't see it on the day you entered. The boys laughed awkwardly. Then Tishi stepped forward. She coughed slightly, approaching the teacher. Shigart said sternly, quiet. He didn't bring them here to play. Then he turned and ordered everyone to take their seats. Kai replied, yes, sir. One of the students standing at a distance muttered contemptuously. A whole bunch of losers from the martial arts department. The others echoed, only a few have real talent. The rest are just trying to get ahead of themselves. Hearing these words, Kai clenched his fists. They're making fun of the martial arts department again. But the protagonist placed a hand on his shoulder and quietly told him to calm down. Lucas sighed silently. As expected, as soon as the martial arts faculty appeared at the tower, they immediately drew attention. Many believed that their positions were taken by chance. The magic faculty teachers had openly declared for the first 2 years that the martial arts faculty contributed nothing to the Empire's development. They had even argued with the headmaster, trying to get the fighters' spots revoked. Utterly shameless. But Mr. Shigart didn't seem at all worried that they might be deprived of their right to teach. Did he trust the school and the headmaster that much? Soon the students sat on the ground. Shigart approached them and calmly said, listen, traditionally third-year students enter the tower first. They must set an example for the newcomers. Then he shouted loudly, third-year students, please prepare yourselves. Jeremiah, clutching his wand tightly, thought, 3 years at the Aron Academy of Magic. Finally, they can enter the tower. He chuckled faintly. The students behind him whispered, this is how you get into the top 100. At that moment, Julia ran forward and shouted loudly, Jeremiah! One of the guys next to him chuckled. That little genius sister. Julia, waving her hand happily, said loudly, he must try hard. Jeremiah, his little sister is rooting for him. Don't let him disappoint her. She froze for a second, noticing that her brother didn't react at all, and thought, no reaction at all. Oh well. She did what she had to, root for him out of respect for his mother. That was enough. Jeremiah and the other students stepped forward. Someone muttered, he hoped they would be transported to the right location. Jeremiah gritted his teeth and firmly said, there was no need to worry. He had been incredibly lucky lately. He glanced ahead briefly and silently added, let them just watch. He would definitely surpass Lucas at Aron Tower. The group entered, and then a commanding voice rang out. Students, place your wands in front of you. Close your eyes. Jeremiah turned sharply and thought, that voice. Meanwhile, Otani was watching everything unfold. He leisurely stroked his beard and quietly said, finally, it begins. He reached out to the hidden mechanisms. His eyes flashed with excitement, and energy began to pulse around him. A chain of gears began to move, transmitting the impulse further, and soon the entire tower was filled with streams of power. At the entrance, Lucas shielded his eyes with his hand, protecting himself from the wave of energy, and thought, such a powerful fighting aura? Is there really a martial artist in this school, stronger than Mr. Shigart? His thoughts raced. So this is why Mr. Shigart was so confident, allowing the martial arts faculty to participate in the Aron Tower test. He knew that the man capable of opening the doors to this academy surpassed even the most powerful martial artists. Not long before, the director had been sitting in a secluded pavilion. He held a cup of warm drink in his hands and mused. Recently, the voices calling for students from the martial arts department to be banned from entering the academy had been growing louder. Let him tell him the nature of this anomaly. Otani, sitting opposite him, placed his cup on the table with a light thud and replied calmly. He thought he'd already told him. There were no anomalies, just as there were no casualties. Then he rose from his seat, turned slightly, and added, he asked him to leave everything as is. If he did so, Aron Tower would be opened as planned. With these words, Otani headed for the teleporter. The director, watching him go, thought he wanted to give the martial arts department a chance. But did that mean he had no right to keep anyone out? Otani had given him too difficult a task. Meanwhile, events were unfolding inside Aron Tower. In the dense forest, Jeremiah leaped forward. A dense wave of energy enveloped his body. He froze for a moment and thought, last time only his consciousness had entered the tower, but now he saw no difference from reality. He glanced at the wand in his hand and noted, even that remained the same. The student in front turned slightly and asked with a slight grin, was he surprised? After all, it was his first time. It's cool that the Aron Tower is so realistic, right? His companion, waving his hand impatiently, snapped, stop dawdling. Let him hurry up and join the others. Jeremiah clicked his tongue in irritation and muttered through clenched teeth, show-offs. At that moment, the protagonist was observing the proceedings, tilting his head thoughtfully and thinking, I wonder if anyone could have imagined that among the students there would be those capable of sensing fluctuations of spiritual energy? That sullen guy, Jeremiah, would have a hard time here. Soon Shigart approached the group. He cast a calm but intent gaze at the students and said, those with a certain level of ability can use a detection technique to observe the situation through the prism of spiritual energy. But first, he'll briefly explain the rules. Once the tests begin, they'll be transported to a random location within this space. They can act independently or form a team. A team can have no more than 3 people. If they plan to climb to the upper floors of the tower, it's best to travel in a group. Kai immediately turned to Lucas and exclaimed, "They said we can form teams, but of course, he'll be with him, right?" And sharpened Collins, he doesn't know which one to ask. Lucas smiled awkwardly and replied calmly, judging by the rankings after the magical beast training competition, he figured they'd all end up in different groups. The other guys nodded in agreement. Yes, Kai muttered quietly. So he's the only one whose scores were too high? Shigart, watching this scene, mentally noted. From his expression, it was clear he could actually sense the spiritual energy inside the tower. Linda said that, even in the special class, only 5 were capable of such a thing. Maybe this guy was one of them? The tower door suddenly swung open, and MC snapped his head around, exclaiming, "He had to see." Someone had already left. Kai, raising his eyebrows in surprise, muttered, "They were third-year students, but they had gotten out too quickly." Shigart calmly explained, "The opponent's strength inside Aron Tower is adjusted to the student's abilities. Every year, there are those who underestimate this challenge and are eliminated within the first few minutes." Lucas, frowning, thought, he'll check on Jeremiah. Meanwhile, in the central part of the tower, a group of students were climbing a spiral staircase. The protagonist thought it seemed like he was going to the second floor with his teammates. Lucky, huh? Soon, they indeed set foot on the second floor of Aron Tower. A long cave stretched before them, the walls and ceiling of which were strewn with enormous crystals. They dimly shimmered, casting a cold glare. Suddenly, several monsters burst out of the shadows to the side. With a loud roar, they leaped into the attack. Jeremiah didn't waver for a moment. He spun around and unleashed plant magic. Green vines shot up, trapping the enemies mid-flight. His teammate immediately supported him, unleashing a wave of soil on the enemy. A torrent of thick mud rushed forward, covering the monsters with its heavy mass. The system immediately responded with a clear voice. Defeating an elite skeleton warrior, plus 10 points. Victory over an elite skeleton warrior, plus 10 points. One of the students, breathing heavily, exhaled. They were close. The second floor really was as dangerous as they said. His comrade, wasting no time, suggested they hurry, while they still had strength and magic. Jeremiah silently nodded in agreement. Sometime later, in the center of the floor, the group encountered a Beastman scout. After a short but fierce fight, the system spoke again. Victory over a Beastman scout, plus 5 points. Then several more skeletons pounced on them. One of them managed to sneak up behind the student, but the student reacted in time and lashed out with a stream of mud. The system message sounded again. Victory over an elite skeleton warrior, plus 10 points. When the group finally exited the tower, the students immediately began chatting animatedly. It's great that they made it to the third floor. They wouldn't have made it right away, but now they're definitely not in last place. One of the guys glanced at Jeremiah and asked with a slight smile, "He's kind of quiet, Jeremiah. Isn't he happy?" He hesitated for a moment and then calmly replied, "Of course he's happy." But to himself, he thought, his father fights enemies just like that. It seemed as if he had taken another step toward becoming like him. A few hours later, the protagonist closed his eyes and thought. He had assessed the situation up to the third floor of the tower using spiritual energy detection. During the test, opponents with completely different characteristics appeared, and even creatures of the same type became stronger as the floor level increased. Were these creatures an exact replica of real-life beasts? If so, how much combat experience did the martial artist who opened Aron Tower have? Then he glanced at the instructors and thought, as expected, Mr. Shigart had most likely guessed his true abilities, but now everyone was simply watching him silently. Was this some kind of goodwill gesture? At that moment, the instructor loudly declared, "Last group, please gather near the entrance." The protagonist mentally perked up. The time had come. The leading group had already reached the fourth floor. Mina and the others, those who had shown the best results in the magical beast training competition, would soon catch up. Then Julia jumped up and joyfully shouted, "Good luck, Mina." Mina turned around and thanked her with a warm smile. A teacher immediately approached the girl and asked solicitously, "Mina, are you sure she's all right?" She smiled confidently. Yes, she'd fully recovered. He nodded, clearly pleased with what he heard. He was glad to hear it. Let her try. The students watching this scene quietly muttered among themselves. Close to a first-year genius and beloved by the teachers. Amazing. Then again, she managed to become vice president in her second year. She may not be as talented as the president, but it's strange that she's not at all popular. Mina caught these words out of the corner of her ear and thought, they're talking about her again. This time, she'll definitely make it to the sixth floor and beat that guy. Meanwhile, on the third floor of the tower, a monster swung its massive club with a deafening roar. Using magic, Mina strengthened her legs and rose into the air, towering over the monsters. She turned sharply to her teammates and firmly declared they would avoid unnecessary fights, end the encounters as quickly as possible, and head straight for the passage to the fourth floor. The others responded in unison. Yes! The group quickened their pace, rapidly approaching the next level. MC, tracking their progress, thought they reached the fourth floor in less than 30 minutes, as expected from the strongest group of third years. Nearby, Kai bit into a loaf of bread, looked at it thoughtfully, and asked, "Does he want one too?" On the fourth floor of Aron Tower, Mina and her team froze before a wall of enormous monsters. The student, clutching her wand tightly, quietly said, "These are the elite beastmen of the fourth floor. Their strength is twice that of the third." Her teammate nodded grimly. Now it was clear why most students dropped out here. The next second, Powerful streams of energy rushed forward, piercing the enemies. The system responded immediately, defeating an elite beastman plus 80 points. Mina continued to channel the stream of power without loosening her grip, and her teammate exclaimed enthusiastically, "Fast!" One of the students quietly remarked, "So it's true. Her abilities have noticeably increased since her last mission." Mina adjusted her glasses slightly and thought it would be better to destroy them with lightning speed. That way they would save a ton of time. Compared to the monster they had fought earlier, these opponents were nothing. Then Mina turned sharply to the guys and firmly said, "They will take responsibility for clearing out the monsters." She would kill the remaining enemies herself and find a way to the 5th floor. After a while, the system calmly announced, defeating a scout beastman plus 40 points. The monsters fell one after another. Soon, the system spoke again, defeating an elite beastman plus 80 points. A little while later, the group approached the entrance to the next level, and one of them exhaled. They had finally reached the 5th floor. At this time, Shigart, who had been observing the test with a special ability, calmly folded his arms and noted, 3 students had already reached the 5th floor, which was better than last year. Hearing this, Kai dropped his loaf of bread in surprise and muttered, "The 5th floor, huh? I wonder when he'll be able to get there himself." The teacher shook his head gently, no need to rush. The 3rd floor was enough for a first year. If he gradually developed his abilities, the enemies on the 5th floor would eventually stop seeming so terrifying. The protagonist, listening to their conversation, thought, it seemed Mr. Shigart himself had once passed through this tower. After some time, the tower doors swung open, signifying the end of the stage, and the protagonist mentally exhaled. It seemed the end. Then an excited student ran to the entrance and called out, "Mina, how are you?" And the protagonist, peering into the faces of those who had returned, sighed quietly, thinking, apparently, she had not achieved her goal. Mina pursed her lips slightly, and unshed tears gathered in the corners of her eyes. At that moment, Theo, casually swinging the magic ball in his hand, looked at her and said, with a slight grin, "Mina, now she finally understands, huh? It's not that easy to compete with a true genius." He smiled wickedly, clearly enjoying her confusion. After a while, Julia joyfully released a sheaf of multicolored sparks from her finger, like tiny fireworks, and exclaimed, "Mina!" She congratulates her on first place in the 3rd-year preliminaries. The protagonists smiled broadly and applauded. They say she made it all the way to the 5th floor, as expected of her, Mina. Mina lowered her gaze slightly, hiding her embarrassment, and quietly thanked, "Thank you." Then, after a slight pause, she added, "But in the end, she still couldn't beat Theo's record." Julia clasped her hands. "Theo's president also stopped on the 5th floor, right? So it's a tie." Mina shook her head. No. By the time she saw the steps leading to the 6th floor, she could barely stand. Theo climbed the stairs and was about to open the door to the 6th level. She gritted her teeth and mentally summed it up. In other words, she was inferior to Theo in stamina, strategy, and mana control. After that, she took a few sips of the cool drink and calmly said, "Oh well, never mind. Have they found teammates yet?" Julia straightened proudly. "She'll be with Iva." MC smiled faintly and thought. It seemed the news of the Miranda family's acceptance of Julia had already reached Iva. He added out loud, "And he's on a team with his neighbors, Sharp and Collins." Julia raised an eyebrow in surprise. "What about Kai? Didn't they have a falling out?" Lucas calmly shook his head. Their ratings were too far apart, so they were divided into different groups. Not long before, Kai grabbed the protagonist by the leg and almost screamed. Is this his excuse for being ignored? Insensitive idiot. And who should he be with then? At that moment, Teishi approached him and calmly asked, would he like to join them? They were in need of a reliable tank. They would be very happy if he became part of their team. Kai froze for a second, then stood up abruptly, cleared his throat slightly, as if chasing away the awkwardness, winked at her and said, well, since they insist, then he will join. Lucas, watching this, thought he quickly moved on. Soon training began. Shigart, running his eyes over the list, nodded with satisfaction. Good. It seems everyone has found a team. Then he frowned and firmly ordered, let everyone concentrate. They know people talk behind their backs, right? No one wants those insults to become reality, right? Teishi raised her fist first and declared decisively, they will train so hard that no one will dare question their right to be here. Another student eagerly echoed this. They will prove they have earned their place in Aran Tower through their own efforts. The students clenched their fists enthusiastically, peering around, filled with determination. At that moment, MC glanced at the teacher and thought, Mr. Shigart hadn't simply allowed the preliminaries to proceed as planned. He had not only stopped the insults that undermined the students' confidence, but had also turned them into motivational fuel. It seemed to have worked perfectly. The phantom enemies inside Aran Tower weren't just strong, they were diverse and highly intelligent. That's why the students constantly trained in groups, honing their teamwork. Between training sessions, Shigart thoroughly explained the characteristics of the different races and combat tactics. Sometimes he even took on the role of an opponent and fought the students, pointing out their mistakes and suggesting solutions. Every day was incredibly grueling, but no one complained. And then came the day of the first-year tryouts. Shigart looked the students over carefully and stated clearly, once inside, the first thing they must do is find their teammates on the central staircase. If they have the strength to run, let them run without looking back. If they can't run, let them fight as if their lives are on the line. and they are obliged to kill at least one enemy. One of the students, glancing sideways at his neighbor, quietly muttered, "Did she hear that? Even their teacher doesn't have much faith in their strength." The girl snorted contemptuously. How pathetic. What a sight it will be when they have to face magical beasts at full strength, without any restrictions. Her classmate smirked. He bet they'll be eliminated in 3 minutes. At that moment, Kai, standing nearby, chuckled and remarked, "The howls of these losers will be simply delightful." Lucas glanced at him and thought, he'd grown so much. The instructor glanced at the formation again and commanded, "Team 12, follow him." The protagonist's team moved forward as one. At that moment, Otani was watching. He leisurely stroked his gray beard and quietly said, "How many years had passed since so many martial artists had entered Aran Tower?" The legacy left by the god of martial arts was finally ready to fulfill its destiny. The next moment, a booming voice rang out from the depths of the tower, echoing through the corridors. Were they now ready for their first true test in life? Time passed, everyone followed the teacher's instructions and headed for the central staircase. An MC was moving through the trees and decided to simply go the other way. Most of the first floor is goblin territory. He heard they use magic to blur the enemy's vision before attacking. He saw fog nearby, immediately rushed there, and told Collins and Sharp to wait for him. He would join them as soon as he finished his experiment. When he found himself in the fog, a goblin immediately targeted him, releasing fog. Lucas quickly dealt with it and touched his chin in confusion, as he thought if his clone killed enemies, he would not get points. The illusionary energy that the enemies in the tower are made of seemed familiar to him. It turns out it is the same energy he uses to create clones. Apparently, these illusions were created by the martial artist who opened the tower. Since his clone and the illusory enemies have the same energy properties, his clones will most likely remain undetected. He will leave this clone to protect his friends while the main body rises up. This is just a great plan. Then an idea occurred to him. If the energy is the same, can he change the appearance of his clones to look like monsters? He tried it. Now they look like goblins, which means he can move freely around the tower. Meanwhile, Otani was watching everyone. He saw Lucas going to the library to secretly read books on martial arts, but to think he mastered the cloning techniques so quickly. It's impressive. What will he do next? Is he going to earn points for his classmates again? Excessive help can only harm them in the long run. He understands that, right? Meanwhile, the children encountered monsters. Goblins approached them, and they ran in panic. Besides them, a huge cyclops was wandering nearby. They took cover behind the trees and began to think about what to do. On their own, they could handle a maximum of 2 goblins. Suddenly, a bright flash appeared in the sky, giving them all strength and confidence. The guy came out from hiding and told them to calm down. The fog was so thick that the cyclops couldn't even see them. They weren't particularly intelligent and moved slowly. First, they needed to increase the distance between them and the giant, and then find the goblins. But they found them themselves. They followed them, and the guys immediately began to fight back. The goblin leaned so hard on one of them that just a little more and he would have fallen, but his friend helped him, chopping off its leg. And when the goblin fell, he was about to plunge his sword into its head, but he stopped it. Watching his comrade, the guy was distracted from the fight with another goblin, and it pounced on him, but he dodged and warned his friend of the danger. He stepped back, causing the goblin to leap at one of his own kind, and then pierced one with his sword. The boys looked at its body in surprise. They actually managed to kill it. As the teacher said, if the 3 of them worked together, they could clear the first floor. The boy glanced at the remaining monster and suggested that his friends go and earn some more points. MC, meanwhile, watched them from the sidelines. Winning requires more than just strength. In some situations, common sense is especially important. Using clones to train his classmates seemed like a completely fair course of action to him, and he hoped everyone would enjoy today's battle. Meanwhile, Greg started showing off as usual. He grinned at his colleague and said that his battle team was surrounded by 3 monsters. His students laughed at them, and Andre said that even they could barely handle 3 at once. Those weaklings from the martial arts department didn't stand a chance. They'd probably be knocked out and come running back soon. Greg mentally called everyone idiots. Even if the martial arts faculty decided to enter the tower, they'd only embarrass themselves. Shigart's shameless confidence was so useless that it was embarrassing. Shigart didn't pay any attention to them, thinking only of his students. If they kept calm, they still had a chance to win. Suddenly, something happened that surprised Greg greatly. He saw Shigart's students easily dispatching the monsters. They only had one left to finish off. The goblin shook with fear, releasing a thick mist at them to escape. And then one of the guys rushed to attack and threw a sword at it, but it jumped back. His friend joined him, getting very close to the monster, then plunging the sword into its palms, pinning it to the ground, and it was time for the third guy. He used the lightning step technique, delivered a powerful blow with all his might, and the goblin died. Greg was both surprised and furious. They killed advanced goblins so quickly, and how did the martial arts department do it? Shigart smiled at his students' successes, and he said they did a great job, after which he turned to the others and said, His class already has a team that defeated the enemy spirits. He taught them that if they fought as he showed, the enemies in the tower aren't that scary. The children also decided to try their best, and Jeremiah grumbled that they were just lucky this time. His friend asked, didn't he just say they were unlucky? While they were arguing, Shigart glanced at the tower and felt some strange energy swirling around the three of them just now. Had Lucas really done something funny again? At that moment, he sneezed loudly, climbed down from the tree, and wondered if Julia was gossiping about him again. She would probably brag about her brother to the others. Someone called out to him. It was his friends, Collins and Sharp. They ran to him, saying that they were so glad that he was okay. He was gone for a long time. They started to worry. MC told them that he was teleported quite far away. What about the others? They led him to the meeting point and told him that another team had not arrived, but everyone else was already here. Seeing Lucas, everyone was very happy, and he waved at them with a smile. It's good that no one was seriously hurt. They were all just tired. The other groups should also arrive soon. Some of them were just approaching. Collins noticed that Lucas was thinking about something and asked what was wrong, and he answered with a smile that it didn't matter. As soon as everyone is gathered, they will head to the second floor. Meanwhile, Greg's students began to discuss everything heatedly. One of them said that they must be fast, since they didn't lose a single team. Most likely, they are in a panic now. Andre asked the teacher about the current status of the martial arts department, and he nervously clenched his teeth as he answered. It looks like they've all reached the second floor. They were shocked by what he said. These weaklings escaped all the enemies on the first floor? Greg was furious. Even first-year magicians usually have expelled students on the first floor. If the martial arts department continues to improve like this, they'll start taking resources from the magic classroom. They're a threat. Meanwhile, the students encountered the first monsters on the second floor. Some kind of humanoid monsters with long tongues and sharp teeth. MC cautiously peeked out from his hiding place and noticed there were quite a few of them. Starting from the second floor, teams are teleported randomly based on their group's performance. The stronger the teams, the harder the challenges. He needed his clone to start searching for the rest of his classmates quickly. He sent the wolves out to scout, after which the boys emerged from their hiding place and asked about the situation. He told them there were a lot of enemies, and they were moving in groups. They said there were a lot of enemies on their side as well, and it would be difficult to completely avoid them. Lucas noted that the tower trials were still meant to gain combat experience, and Collins agreed. Running away all the time meant failing the trial's objective. Suddenly, something crashed down on them from above, but fortunately, they managed to jump aside in time. Collins said he didn't even notice two enemies getting so close, and Sharp said that if he had been really close, he would have already been killed. MC frowned. There were two monsters in front of them. One of the beastmen rushed to attack, and Lucas noticed the second one behind him, who had begun to act, and immediately attacked him. After that, he grabbed the beastman and thought it was quite clever of them to first faint and then immediately call for backup. The beastman dropped a horn, returned to his comrades, and said that it was only the vanguard. If they didn't finish them off quickly, reinforcements would arrive. Sharp didn't even understand what had happened, and Collins only now noticed that his dagger was missing. In fact, MC had grabbed it in a panic and accidentally thrown it away. Suddenly, he sensed something and warned them of another enemy approaching right under their feet. The ground behind Sharp became loose, and he immediately turned and swung his weapon just as the monster emerged from underground. He remembered what his teacher had said. The enemies on the second floor are a completely different level than those on the first. They are stronger and smarter, capable of surprise attacks and even stealing weapons. It happened to him too. The monster snatched his hammer. He said with a smile, even if they steal his weapon, they will soon regret it. And then the monster felt a sharp pain in his arm. Sharp was glad that the stone dragon bracers he bought with points were finally useful. He immediately rushed to the attack and shouted. When it comes to strength, no one can compare to him. He struck. The monster managed to jump aside. Then he sent his friend. Collins approached the monster from behind and kicked it with all his might, throwing it aside. Sharp, meanwhile, prepared himself. He gathered all his strength in his fist, and then delivered a powerful blow from the stone dragon, which killed the monster instantly, and they received points for it. Lucas approached him, smiling, praised them for excellent teamwork. They needed to keep moving forward for the sake of the martial arts department. Greg was incredibly nervous at this point. No one had been kicked out of the martial arts department yet. With their skill level, they should have been surrounded and wiped out by the time they reached the second floor. Andre asked if they were so weak that the tower had simply lowered the difficulty for them. His friends told him that if that were the case, the teachers would have filed a complaint long ago. Greg was so nervous that he started biting his nails as he watched everything unfold. Meanwhile, in the tower, they encountered new opponents. MC quickly dealt with a monster by slamming its head into the floor, and his friends dealt with the skeletons. Collins quickly dodged a heavy ball. While the skeleton was raising its sword, Collins had already managed to land multiple quick blows, and the monster was shattered. But that wasn't all. He quickly gathered his bones and was about to strike, but Sharp arrived just in time to save him. After that, he asked how many they had killed already, and Collins answered that they had killed 3 already. By the way, he was tiring much more slowly today. Lucas used the hero's battle cry, which immediately filled them with strength, and he thought everyone had reached the second floor without a scratch. If he used the Ryan family technique, the hero's battle cry, then most likely they would be able to pass the second floor together. Meanwhile, the students from another sector encountered a goblin riding on wolves. Two stood there distracting them, and the third, an archer, attacked them from cover and killed the leader, after which the students began to deal with the wolves. In Zone C, they encountered a huge cyclops, which they deftly felled with a thread. Goblins were active in Zone D, but they were also quickly killed. The guy joyfully exclaimed that this was amazing. He never thought they could defeat so many enemies. At this rate, they might actually reach the third floor. MC monitored each sector, checking on their progress. Meanwhile, Greg was very concerned about what was happening in the tower, and the teachers began to discuss the situation. All 12 martial arts students reached the stairs to the third floor. They didn't look like first years at all. What did Teacher Shigart even teach them? Would they really all make it to the third floor? Greg smirked and said that wouldn't happen. Some martial arts students were already at the limit of their physical capabilities. They would soon be forcibly ejected from the tower. Indeed, after constant fighting, everyone was very tired. Collins was the first to fall. Lucas caught him and worriedly asked if he was okay, and Collins, looking at his disappearing body, told him that he was fine. But this was his limit. He told him not to worry about him and continue climbing. MC's face darkened. The other students also lost all their strength and lay down right on the stairs, and told him to get to the third floor for them. Let him show those arrogant people from the magic class their strength. But Sharp was not going to give up so easily. He said that they had come this far. They could at least try to get to the third floor together. Lucas smiled and agreed with him. They were a team after all. They needed to work together and get through that door to the third floor together. In the end, they decided to squeeze out the last of their strength, and all together, 12 of them, reached the third floor. This floor was a fiery lair, and before they could take a step, they were attacked by monsters. The beast devoured one of them, and they noticed it at the last moment, when they had already run away. The guy wanted to attack, but the monsters quickly pounced on them, and killed Lucas and everyone else, and then pounced on the guy too. Meanwhile, the eliminated students began discussing the tower. The third floor was merciless. They didn't even have time to see how many enemies there were, besides that last guy standing. MC thought, the third floor is the current limit of the martial arts department. To avoid suspicion, he deliberately allowed only his real body to be eliminated. But his clone is still inside the tower. So by supporting the second group of the martial arts department with the hero's battle cry, he can get everyone to the third floor. That way, everyone will get a good result, and no one will stand out. No, to be more precise, the entire martial arts department will probably stand out. The team with his friends was also eliminated. The remaining students were very surprised that everyone made it to the third floor. Usually, only the elite building can do that. Greg knew this was bad for them. They had to surpass the martial arts department in both points and floors reached. Magic classes can't lose to action classes. Meanwhile, his students were barely fending off the goblins and cyclopes. Otani watched them and wondered if losing to the combat department was really that unbearable. He was already expending magic power like water from the first floor. What was he going to do on the second and third? They were losing their composure. It seemed like first-year magic students weren't up to much in this department. After a while, the teacher announced, Group 3 had 8 eliminated on the first floor and didn't make it to the second. Group 4, 3 eliminated on the first floor and didn't make it to the second. Group 8 reached the third floor without losses and were eliminated there. Group 9 reached the third floor with 3 eliminated on the second floor and were eliminated there. Not a single student ranked 40th or lower made it to the third floor. Moreover, some teams were completely annihilated on the first floor. Greg couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed the teacher by the shoulder and exclaimed that this was wrong. It's a trap set against the magic classes. The enemies only start to multiply and become stronger when it's their turn, right? The teacher asked him to calm down, and then Linda intervened, saying, it's unacceptable to deny reality in front of the students. Doesn't Teacher Greg understand that Aaron Tower is working properly? Or is he trying to say that his sensory abilities have weakened? He didn't know what to say. They walked past him and went to Shigart, and while they were chatting, he bit his lower lip until it bled and thought that they were all an eyesore. Linda, meanwhile, asked her colleague, surpassing the magic classes is quite impressive, isn't it? That's why she told him that everything will work out if you try. He told her that it wasn't his merit, it was the result of the students' own hard work. More importantly, it was soon the turn of the elite course. Shouldn't she be there? She told him that these children didn't need her concern. Besides, the class monitor was there. Julia approached the tower and shouted to the other students that her older brother was amazing. If he puts his mind to it, he can go much higher than the 4th floor. The students became uneasy and thought, why does the best first year have to be from the martial arts department? They already feel defeated even before the test has begun. The examiner told Julia's group to proceed to the tower, and Lucas wished her luck and reminded her to eat candy. The man wondered what kind of candy he was talking about, and when Julia took it out, he was surprised. It was a magic power pill that instantly restores mana. Pills of this quality are extremely expensive because martial artists capable of creating them are very rare these days. What a waste, using such a precious thing for the sake of a school test. When she ate it, she shuddered at the disgusting taste, and MC thought that she already had a huge reserve of magic power. But since everyone takes potions before the test, he thought she should take it too. This guarantees her excellent results. When she and her team entered the tower, she immediately began to destroy everything. The monsters didn't even have time to approach them before they died from her powerful lightning. Iva was surprised by her control. She directed the lightning precisely at the enemies. Julia turned to her with a smile, telling her to stay close. At this pace, they quickly reached the 3rd floor. Julia released her thunderbirds into the sky. They found all the monsters in the area and exploded, killing them, so the path was finally clear. A thunderbird landed on Julia's staff and she turned to her comrades with a smile, saying that she had dealt with all the nearby enemies and suggested they move on. Derek remarked, "It's good to have her nearby. That lizard used to be resistant to fire, so his fire magic alone wouldn't have been enough." She smiled and replied that she was also glad he was here, while Iva said with displeasure, "If this were the real world, she would have simply controlled their minds and forced them to kill each other." Julia didn't deny it. Iva would definitely be much more impressive on a real battlefield. The girl was even surprised by her words. The phantoms in Aran Tower have no consciousness, so her mental magic is useless here. All she can do is locate enemies, so she's just useless ballast here. And yet she doesn't complain at all. She even acknowledges her abilities. She was pleased, but she didn't show it and arrogantly said that she would cede the leading role to her this time. She quickly moved forward and the others ran after her. At that very moment, Lucas's clone ran away, and Iva sensed it and immediately turned around, causing Julia to crash into her. She asked why she suddenly stopped. Was there really an enemy there? She confusedly answered that she must have imagined it. She had a strange feeling the whole time. It wasn't an enemy or a classmate. Derek asked her to find a route with a minimum number of enemies when they reached the 4th floor, while Lucas's clone hid and never showed up again. The three eventually reached the 4th floor. MC smiled and thought that it was dangerous. Mental magic users really are very perceptive. The teachers immediately began discussing the news of their progress, one of them saying that it was simply incredible, proof of how well teacher Linda teaches. She told them it was simply the result of the students' own diligence, and her colleague said the elite course hadn't shown such results in 30 years. Lucas thought, "Of course, Julia is outstanding. The effect of the magic pill only increases the magic power reserve. How high Julia and the others can rise depends on their own abilities. In the Aran Tower, he can only calmly watch his sister grow." The 4th floor of the tower was a vast library. Julia quickly dealt with the monsters that attacked them, and Iva suddenly ran up to her and told her to be careful. There were 4 enemies behind her. The ghosts of archers emerged from the walls. They loaded thunder arrows, and before Julia could respond to their attack, her classmate blasted them with flames. He approached them and said that she should be exhausted after the 3rd floor. He would deal with these monsters himself. At that moment, new monsters appeared. The boy managed to dodge an arrow flying at him at the last moment. Then he changed his position and unleashed a blazing flame at them, which killed them all at once. He turned to the girls with a satisfied smile and asked, "His fire magic is pretty good too, right?" But they ignored him, preoccupied with the new monsters. Iva sensed many enemies approaching, about a dozen, and they were rushing straight at them with incredible speed. They rushed toward the exit, but Iva sensed something again and turned around. The monsters just defeated by the flames had risen again and began attacking them. The girl managed to jump aside, but because of this delay, they didn't have time to exit. The iron bars lowered right in front of them, blocking the exit. And a new monster for this floor appeared. A huge pig with his pet wolf. There were several such monsters surrounding them. Derek said it was useless. Only a metal magic user could deal with these bars. Iva slammed her hand against the iron bars and said there was actually another way. At that moment, a wolf pounced on her, but fortunately, Julia managed to raise a thunder barrier in time, causing the beast to be thrown back and electrocuted. Iva said that high-temperature flames could also melt metal, and Julia immediately came up with a plan. They would deal with the enemies, while Derek would focus on melting the bars. He set to work, and the huge pig and his brethren rushed to attack, but the thunder barrier held them all back for now. Julia was having a hard time maintaining this against 3 monsters at once, and Iva told her that the 4th monster from the left was the fastest and weakest. Julia immediately struck him with lightning, throwing him aside, and looked questioningly at her friend, who exclaimed that now was not the time to explain. 3 on the left, 2 on the right, let her do the talking. Julia smiled, completely trusting her, and began attacking them, gradually reducing the pressure on the barrier. Iva continued to support her. If these were enemies from the 3rd floor, they would have already been torn to shreds, as expected. But the monster from the 4th floor was a completely different level. She told Julia to deal with the right side first, and she immediately zapped those monsters with electricity, and caught her breath. She would soon run out of magic power. She apologized to Iva. Now she could only hold off the giant. She nervously clenched her teeth and thought of another way. She needed to find the right moment and finish off the wolf. Julia prepared herself, and Iva thought, what was she even talking about? She was already doing more than enough. She should be the one apologizing for not being able to do anything. Julia gathered her last strength and struck. 2 wolves were struck by lightning and thrown aside, their bodies dissolving. The 2 could finally catch their breath, and Julia asked, since they defeated them all and the giant was still immobilized, they were safe now, right? When they got out of here, could she boast that she protected her classmates like a true class representative? She remarked that she had such a high opinion of herself, to which she only laughed. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a huge club of the monster flew at them, which immediately smashed the shield, and Iva was hit. She gritted her teeth, angry at herself. How could she not notice another group of enemies approaching? She turned to Julia, telling her to run quickly. And then her body dissolved, and Julia screamed loudly, calling for her. Derek ran up to her and blasted the monster with flames, saying that he managed to open a passage wide enough for only her to fit through, so she should go. But she wasn't going to leave him here alone, and he said with a smile that she couldn't waste her magic power here. Right after that, the monster struck him. He managed to block the blow and swung his weapon, raising a huge wall of flame, and told Julia to go on. After that, there was an explosion, and Derek returned from the illusion.